occupies all the strip. And there's a second train that is full of surprises, and everyone thinks it will solve all our existential problems. And this is the Saudi train that travels towards normalization, which is obviously the United States is the engine of this train. Whether this train indeed will solve all of our problems and bring us to the better place, is it even relevant train for us at that particular point? What did change between the 6th and 7th of October on this matter? And this is part of the issues and questions that we'll be answering during this conference today. I hope it will be an interesting and delightful event. It's also being broadcasted through different means that we use. Together with Misgav Institute, I would like to invite to the stage Ronen Levi Maoz to say a few words. So, good afternoon, distinguished guests, the head of National Council of Security, Mr. Tzachi, Hanegbi, Tamir, my dearest friend and colleague, Meir, my teacher and mentor, distinguished guests. In the beginning of my speech, I would like to wish for a safe return of 125 hostages and the importance of their return home as quickly as possible, and would like to bless the soldiers that are currently fighting at different front lines. I'm very happy to participate in this very important encounter of two very important leading think tanks with researchers and colleagues that personally I know for a few decades. But more than that, I'm happy that we have a chance to discuss right now this fascinating and an important topic for the State of Israel and our partners, normalization with Saudi Arabia and additional countries. That, alongside with the wounds and issues that are currently open and untreated. To my understanding, the operational failure of the security agencies under the harsh attack of the Hamas, alongside with the complex campaign that developed in the north and the various circles of warfare that evolved, impacted significantly the status of Israel, including in the Abraham Accords countries, which led to significant deterioration in the connections at personal and business between Israel and the regional countries. Obviously, of course, the process of normalization has been infringed with new countries. It's not just Saudis, by the way. I have to add again the tension between Israel and the United States during the month before the 7th of October attack, which weakened the status of Israel in the region as a close ally, as someone who can provide a direct line to Washington. Before we begin the discourse, and in order for us to delve deeper within the limits of time that I have, I wanted to share with you a little bit of my experience of necessary stipulations to create normalization. First of all, the necessary rule is the interest of involved parties. Usually, it's more than two relevant countries in question. There's always a third party, sometimes fourth party in this sense, and the stability of the governance among all the partners, in fact. Timing. And here as well, timing that is suitable for all the parties. Changes in values and ability to market this agreement inwards and outwards as something that has more advantages than disadvantages, which is tremendously important, highlighting that in front of the quote-unquote, the target audience here and far away. Strength and power. Peace is something you do with those who are strong and not weak. Deep understanding of local culture, that bears tremendous importance in our zip code where we work and live. And the last but not the least, of course, the last condition is the personal connection of everyone involved, and trust. The more trust you have, the better it is. In order to describe and to see the process of normalization, and I'm removing the Saudis from this discourse, that particular point, I can say here, and usually they mention the names of the countries, that before the 7th of October, during my role as the Director General of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there's a part of the special team task force that was created. We managed to create an initial contacts with 8 Islamic countries above the borders of the Middle East, all over the globe. The connections that we started to forge with the first circle of the rulers in those countries with a very clear intent to create processes and steps toward normalization. With some of those countries, we were almost at the last part of the agreements. Normalization agreement with the Saudis is very valuable, of course, and will become an accelerator and a facilitator that will remove many of the barriers among other Muslim countries and will bring to addition of many other countries to the agreements with Israel. Here I would like to open a window to other zip codes with the proper conditions, those that exist and those that will have to forge. We can move as well with agreements with other countries, which is also very important. In addition to ability to create agreements and normalization with new countries, what is extremely important in my eyes, where we are quite weak, unfortunately, is our ability to preserve and to nurture and to deepen for a long period of time existing connections with countries that we have diplomatic or economical relations. In our neighborhood, gossip is a profession, it's a trade. We all talk to each other, we ask each other, and leaders bring other leaders. Not necessarily always we manage and know how to operate according to those circumstances and conditions and customs of the region. We create disappointment, which obviously impacts the ability to create connections with other countries, new countries. But let's go back to the Saudis. Before 7th of October, we were on the brink of the agreement with the Saudis, and we could have reached understandings and a triple agreement during the first quarter of 2024. And yes, I do see as the sudden attack of Hamas on 7th of October as an intentional move in order to sabotage the significant diplomatic efforts that Israel led in this field. So if there are still channels of discussions, the difference and the distance between the agreement and ability to sign it is significant. I would like to go back to my initial conditions I mentioned, which obviously in the current reality, many of them do not exist. The triple agreement is still part of the national interest of the Saudis, Israel, and United States. But until the war will not get to the more recessive part, it will be impossible to lead it to the final finish line. On 14th of April, we saw an example of tremendous importance of such an agreement with strong allies in the Middle East. We saw a failing attempt of Iran to attack Israel. Well, for the first time, they managed to step out the shadows and attack Israel on our own soil, from their territory. Our joint regional interests require us to become strong allies. This is how partners would like to see us as well. We have the duty as a society and the state to grow from this strategy of 7th of October and to continue to promote political moves and security developments through signing of normalization agreements with the Saudis and additional countries. And this is, in my eyes, will be an actual real failure of Iran and its proxies. An agreement with the Saudis will reshape anew the face of the Middle East and will bring to a new economical horizon for all the countries of the region, and Israel will be able to position itself at the regional and global commerce center at the main axis between East and West, all the contacts and all the negotiations. The partners use terms of peace and prosperity as the leading northern star of this reality. But in the current complex reality, highlighting the need to continue warfare in Gaza and lack of victory and decisive victory in the north, normalization with the Saudis at that particular point of time, I think is not on the agenda. We need to generate conditions and infrastructure to create a significant agreement, maybe as part of integration of Arabic countries in the region at the day after, as a part of the victory of light above darkness. We must win in Gaza and to create stability in the north, to rehabilitate the connections with the Abraham Accords countries, to deepen and to complete our relationships with the African countries, highlighting and emphasizing Sudan, and reinforce the political status of the State of Israel in the light of anti-Semitism that is growing all over the world for the future of our children. And in order to wrap it up, I thought of quoting a very powerful sentence of Nelson Mandela, the former president candidate, but I think what is really suitable is a local proverb that is so true for our discourse and our life in general. Something in Arabic. You can't applaud with one hand. You need two for tango. I hope it will be a very fruitful day for you and very enriching day. Thank you, Maoz. Mr. Tzachi Hanegbi, the advisor of national security, and correspondent Schneider will be taking the stage now. So how are you doing? Yeah, well, also at your left, really. So I'm basically at your right there. All right, I'm good with that. So good afternoon, all of you, and thank you for inviting me to interview the advisor of national security, Mr. Tzachi Hanegbi. So how are you doing, sir? Thank you. So in fact, it's been said today by Ronen, Levi, that we're almost on the brink of an agreement with the Saudis and one can reach the agreement again. But then in one sentence, he actually said that at that particular point there are no conditions. So I'm slightly confused. So can we give the Saudis what they want? So they will actually say that they're still considering to go through a process with the Palestinians just in order for us to have normalization or beginning of normalization. Can we give them this sentence of maybe something in the future for the Palestinians? Tal, first of all, I would like to thank Tamir and Meir that I am part of their career and they're part of my career for so many years in different roles they fulfilled. Meir, when I was in your room for the first time, I thought that I'm about to enjoy a spectacular phenomena, and this year and 4 months were so challenging for me to work with you. But I do remember that I was there in this area of the aquarium compound with Yitzhak Shamir in 1986. I was in the room near you. I was the manager of the bureau of the Prime Minister, and Shamir every day finished, and this is a scoop really, Tal. Before he was going home, Shamir said, wow, it's hard, it's so hard. So yeah, this is how it feels when you are Prime Minister of Israel or the head of national security or head of INSS or head of any other think tank. Yeah, life is not much fun, it's really hard. So many challenges. So the challenge of normalization. So first of all, I completely agree with Maoz. We're on the brink of final agreements before 7th of October. Everyone was so optimistic. And the American administration led a move that was very feasible in our eyes. At that particular point, now it's been postponed. I would less adopt the approach that Ronen presented, that this is not completely on the agenda. It's still on the agenda, really. And we'll invest any effort necessary to keep it on the agenda because we have a tremendous interest in realization of this vision of normalization, regardless Gaza Strip. Since Samson said that from Beisa, sweet will emerge, so maybe from Gaza something sweet will emerge as well. But again, it is, as Ronen just mentioned, they're quite complicated. It's not just the Palestinian matter. There are also other issues that there is an intent to declare the end of war in Gaza and leave Gaza, as some require us to do. Obviously, this is impossible at that particular moment. But this is not the end of the American attempts to actually reach this agreement. But let's put things openly on the table. We're here among friends. We all understand that the Saudis are looking for just a declaration, a formal declaration on the Palestinian topic from the State of Israel. They would like to hear and declaration of intentions and not necessarily actions. And the government is not willing to give it to them in an official statement. There was a political, obviously, example. The Saudis are very consistent. They had it from 2002. It's always there. The slave service that are required. They will never give it up. I don't know what kind of declaration of the government you mean. As a response to 6 ultimatum points of Benny Gantz. It's a political topic, so it's less connected to the normalization, I would say. The Knesset, with a majority of 91 against, I don't know how many, probably the Arabic parties voted against it, decided few weeks ago that we are not agreeing. The parliament, I'm not in the parliament, they disagree to the dictations that will be forcing a Palestinian state without negotiations that will define the meanings of such a development. And there is a consensus that we shall never receive any dictations from the Saudis upon the Palestinian. We have many peace agreements, and I was part of signature of 4 of them, but previous one, Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres, there were no any, and Menachem Begin, obviously. There were no any peace, those peace agreements, there were no impositions, no requirements, and Israel never actually accepted such an imposition. That as a part of the peace agreement will also create the Palestinian state. So the Saudis as well, I don't think they have the right to demand or impose upon us. If what you say is correct, I'm not familiar well with the fact that there's an agreement between the Americans and the Saudis upon the stipulations of normalization, but if what you actually stated is correct and there's some kind of formula that all the parties can actually live with, I mean, the horizon for the Palestinians, which is our interest again and related to normalization as well, and of the conflict with the Palestinians, obviously is our interest, though it will not allow the Dekel to have a plan. Our program, he's the head of the program that is dedicated to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Udi, what are you going to do then? But we have a tremendous interest in the end of this conflict. Oh, that will be a post-conflict program, of course. But we want to reach such an agreement with the Palestinians to put this conflict behind us. But you very well understand the ramifications of creation of the Palestinian state, discuss it for decades and argue about that for decades. So if the Americans and the Saudis will be building a formula where all the parties can exist with, well, we can move forward. But as I said, what seems to be more probable, more problematic is the war in Gaza. Because here, if there will be a requirement that IDF will withdraw from Gaza and Hamas will go back to being a sovereign in Gaza, it will be very difficult. And Ronen is correct. Such a calm down after a complete absolute victory. I'm not sure that we'll obtain the absolute victory that normalization is dictating 2 or 3 months from now, according to the political season in the United States. But such a calm down after Rafah, I think we'll be moving from a more intense campaign with all the capacity we showed during this period of time to different level of intensity. If Saudis can swallow that, I think it will move us forward. Okay, Rafah, so we have a really difficult day behind us here from international perspective and political perspective. Can you comment on that, what happened this night and where we're actually going? Because the question is whether we are currently violating the order, the court order that was issued, whether some kind of wording, I'm not even capable of repeating it by heart, that we need to maintain a life condition that will not lead to mass destruction or mass murder. Whether the events of tonight are a violation of such an order, are we in trouble? Are we towards a different, a new order that will be issued? How would you analyze what happened? So look, let's look at the context. South Africa is trying for month and month to coerce us with those orders that will lead, in fact, to the end of our ability to defend ourselves. So all of those orders, in the end of the day, all of those appeals to receive those orders as a part of the genocide treaty were actually refused, were not submitted. There's a lot of anger upon this court that is even actually working on it, I understand this rage. And part of it, but the panel of the judges was very balanced during this period of time, and they issued orders that we can actually live with, that ask us to do things we do anyway, not to do genocide, obviously, or not to incite towards genocide, or to allow humanitarian aid, or to allow an ability to submit a report. But 40 people and 1/10 of the displaced persons, I will get to the 40 people. I don't know how many of them actually. But the last order, the last court order that you asked me about was indeed quite a windy one, really. But from a legal perspective, it was very clear. It prohibits Israel to perform military actions that will impose upon the Palestinian group. This is the genocide treaty definition, that you cannot actually do genocide in groups the way they did to the Jews in the Holocaust. So the Palestinian group, we should not impose upon them circumstances of life of destruction, eradication, partial or complete. So obviously the IDF doesn't do that, partially or completely, of the Palestinian group. So this order doesn't prevent the continuation of the operation in Rafah, and will not restrict, the intent is to restrict the four existing brigades of the Hamas. Well, the spokesperson of the IDF said there was a vital elimination of important 4 seniors of the Hamas, which was successful. We don't know what happened there, what led to this fire that obviously took life of uninvolved civilians. We always obviously sorry for such a tragedy. Whether in a tent where there was an explosive that led to such a level, there were among the missiles, you think? I don't want to say anything because the debriefing still goes on. The IDF yesterday delivered the beginning, and I'm sure today we'll have more details. So if indeed something happened because it was our fault, we'll continue to be as cautious as we can. We do very difficult things, really, as a military. Innocently, we killed 3 of our hostages, and there's so many actually friendly fire casualties. When there are tragedies, we debrief. We need to understand. Sometimes there are tragedies that we impose upon ourselves because war is war, and there's so much uncertainty and fog. It's very painful. We don't want people to be hurt, obviously unrelated to the ramifications on the international arena. But I don't think it was a violation of the order. Personal question, if it's possible, you're also a father of a fighting soldier or a combatant soldier, and myself as well. So how's your son doing? Is he okay? 200 days within. In the military, yeah. I have another son who served for 70 years. Another son of mine is currently being trained in different combatant units. So I have 3 fighting soldiers in your family. On and off, not all of them are there all the time. One of them is constantly there. So first of all, I wish they will return healthy, all of them. Amen. I would like to ask you a question that might be slightly naive in your eyes, but that's why they brought me here, to ask you more simplistic questions, something very over layman. Why the state of Israel, in fact, can't, under your leadership, declare the end of warfare and to demand, bring all of them, bring them all, including Golden and Shaul, the deceased, and other bodies they hold, all the soldiers. It really concerns me that they don't talk about the soldiers, the men soldiers that are there, and the life, I hope. Let's bring them all back. Let's declare the end of war. We all know that the same bunch of rapists, murderers, they are unreliable, obviously, and they can't be trusted, and they will not comply with any agreement, and they will violate it, and Israel will be able to respond again, and will say, okay, launch of balloons or missiles, okay, we're done. Bring those people back, and then we know this conflict will not be over, and they will violate. They will be the first one to violate this agreement. It's very clear to all of us. It's a dilemma, and you presented it in the way it's been actually existing in all the possible forums. I think that Israel presented offers to not to release generous suggestions of Israel. Hamas indeed does require, and he demands something else. He demands us to surrender, in fact. Surrender, not the end of war, but this is a laundered expression that I would say is slightly sterile. The real intent is so everyone who fell were in vain, and those who were slaughtered, 1,200 citizens were slaughtered in vain. And we did not reach a decisive result, and the Hamas will continue to rule over Gaza, and this is extremely problematic. From the other hand, the time is not on the side of the hostages, and there is a certain priority to try to find a scenario to extract the hostages, even there is a price. Israel agreed to pay significant price, and we agreed to pay significant prices. We still believe that two purposes can be obtained at the same time: to extract and release the hostages, living and dead, and not to get back to 6th of October and to say again and again, oh yeah, it will be fine, okay, we'll do what we need to do. For 17 years we said that, and Hamas from 2007, which is 17 years, stood and armed itself and strengthened itself, and we constantly had all those operations and campaigns, because the price of war is so heavy. There was no motivation, there was no legitimacy, internal and external, to do what we do right now. And if we'll stop right now, I don't know whether they'll ever receive motivation and legitimacy. And again, and we'll create this monster, there will be this monster, and dozens of thousands of armed, strategically capable men, and the next massacre is just a question of time, and they swear to bring another massacre upon our heads, so we need to be very decisive. We need to be very different from what we were until 6th of October. But the hostages is a sacred topic. Hopefully we'll succeed with it. People that are here, they're familiar with the negotiations with Hamas. There's some people that we talked to that negotiated with Hamas on Gilad. They received 95% of what they asked for in the beginning. Not under Netanyahu government, but under Olmert government when he was kidnapped. But 5 years and 4 months later, they actually managed to obtain all they wanted. So we know in the end of the process they will get what they want. And years will go by. How many of those people will survive there for 5 years and 4 months? I am not certain that today, for example, would have a secretive referendum whether Shalit deal was in fact a right thing to do. Not majority would have actually. I know then there was a majority. I was a minority that opposed Shalit deal, and I was the head of the Security Committee then. I was a negligible minority. Majority of the public changed its standing to save Gilad. That one of those who were released in this deal would be Yahya Sinwar, and will lead Hamas to the actions of 7th of October. I'm absolutely sure today, in retrospect, people would definitely be changing their mind. But we're so merciful, and obviously when it comes to dozens of hostages that are going through inconceivable nightmares, them and their families, obviously. Significant point, because again, I don't know what to say about Gilad Shalit, but obviously we have a significant interest to end this war and to obtain its goals, while the main goal the government defined, the central one, the Gaza will not constitute a risk or danger for the state of Israel, so we can't tolerate a military presence of dozens of thousands of people that can do again and again what they did already. And I think that this is the mission that is possible, very aspirational, but it's not too pretentious really. We know how to do that. IDF reached significant advantages during the last 8 months, and I can honestly say that IDF honestly presented to the cabinet in the beginning of the discussion that they can't guarantee us an immediate blitz victory. They presented a program that takes time. And 2024 is defined as a warfare time. It's the 5th month of 2024. And we think that in general we need this strong stamina, because hostages obviously is quite a shocking situation because of the personal ramifications that are horrible. But there are matters of national security as well that we need to integrate between our targets and not to prioritize one target above another. So the military performance is good. But the political performance, in this sense, the diplomatic and strategic one, the completing part is almost inexistent. You hear it really from right and left, from top and bottom, from the former ones and the current ones. We hear all the time. In order to cause the collapse of Hamas regime, we need to stop allowing them to be those who control the utilities, schools, deliver food within a few months. And if there is no one else who starts to nibble upon this leadership that they obtain, they will survive in the tunnels, and the military actions will be absolutely annulled by the lack of diplomatic action. I disagree with the apocalyptic scenario, really, and I will explain to you why. There is a political diplomatic effort, and I think that the picture is quite balanced, really. Yeah. The first days in the cabinet, they said that the time is almost done. Within a week or two of war, we don't have more time. We're running out of time. And the biggest superpowers in the universe, well, besides two that are against us, United States and France and Britain and Germany, still support the purpose of the war, which is disarmament of Hamas. I have different reservations about the humanitarian matters, and we try to actually support them. And it buys us time with this hourglass that is not running away. There are casualties that we try to definitely decrease, and we have different disagreements about we're trying to maintain a dialogue, but they give us a political, diplomatic backup for the central purpose of the war, including the General Council, veto after veto after veto of the Americans, with all the tension and all the discussions and disputes around the munition and Rafah operation, but still the Biden administration are part of our approach that the stronghold of Hamas cannot be there any longer, that they can't impact state of Israel while holding hostages 2 million of Palestinians. Yeah, there is a big deal of the day after, that's true. We fail at that point to persuade at least the media in Israel and maybe people abroad that the day after cannot be a standalone event. It's a day after Hamas. And to get to this day after Hamas, we need to break their neck. And it's true, we can't wait when it happens, and we need to prepare, and we need to examine different alternatives that will be relevant on the day after Hamas. But the Council of National Security received from the Prime Minister many months ago this mission, and we had 11 meetings, in-depth meetings with all the entities relevant in the State of Israel from various agencies and diplomatic corps. What do we think will serve our interest in this region? We presented in the cabinet a number of times, and during this week, this Thursday, there is a summary hearing that is called the Alternatives of the Sovereignty of Hamas, of Governance of Hamas, and hopefully there we will be building. What are the alternatives really for this governance of Hamas? So it will be a discussion this Thursday. The alternatives are all known to you. Civic society or some kind of civilian private security company? No, the IDF control, the military regime, local authority, clans and tribes, civic and private companies, Arabic force, the Emirates, Americans, Saudis, so many other things. They all quite virtual, really, because none of them would dare, really, to put their foot in Tzachi or Sabra or Beit Hanun or Beit Lahir. Because they will be getting a bullet in the head from Hamas. So let's not live in an illusion. If you will, playing with ourselves, decide that there is an alternative act that is the best, that it will become reality immediately. No, it's quite difficult when Hamas is still relevant. You presented here one of the alternatives, the military regime. You said civilian martial law of Israel. I said it again. I'm not saying that one of the alternatives is prioritized. I'm saying what are the alternatives? I know it's theoretically possible. But we heard the Minister of Defense of the state facing the public on television saying this alternative shouldn't be an alternative, it's a horrible alternative. I want to hear from the Prime Minister that this is not an option. But you're actually saying it will be brought up as an alternative during this. No, that's not what I said. That was quite a scoop, really. No. He didn't say that he doesn't want it. He said he's against the martial law as military regime, not as a virtual alternative, but as a decision that will be in the end. I'm not familiar. That in the war cabinet, no one, including the Prime Minister, that wants the military Israeli IDF law in Gaza. You're not familiar in the cabinet? No one? You don't know. There are two ministers. So martial law is that in the war cabinet. I'm sorry, war cabinet. Yeah, war cabinet will be falling apart within 10 days, if I'm not mistaken, which will be irrelevant. Today is so apocalyptic. Everything is falling apart. Nothing works. What happened? That we brought you here to be optimistic. Really? You know. Again, let's put it this way. Again, I'm going back to my personal matter. Both of us were all stressed and pressed because of, but in the general cabinet, and it's a very expanded cabinet, there are people that support the settlements in Gaza to continue our presence in Gaza. This is a legitimate position that represents the point of view of their constituents, but in the war cabinet, I never heard no one who thinks that they prioritize the possibility is a martial Israeli regime in Gaza. Sometimes you've been dragged into such an alternative that is not most appealing one, in fact. But the alternative that in my eyes is the best was presented by the Council of National Security as well, and this is of the civilian matter will be managed and run by local leadership. We want to look where they were, Fatah or not. What is important that they're not Hamas. But what matters is really that in any situation, the surplus of security, responsibility of demilitarization of Gaza and fighting terror that will not disappear when the brigades will dismantled. We'll have thousands with RPG here and there with ability to attack, tunnel here or explosive device there. It won't disappear. It didn't disappear in Jenin. It didn't disappear in Nablus. Or in Nur al-Shams after 56 years that we're there, after 30 years of Palestinian authority, so we don't have any delusions that the terrorism will be pushing down their arms. We say, we just spent decades on that, that's okay. We don't want a war on an organization that became actually a military of terrorism with tremendous power, with the monies from the Iranians. That's what we want to eradicate. There's certain disagreements between the war cabinet and Nitzan Alon, and he will be replaced. I'm not familiar with any disagreements with Nitzan Alon. It's so different publications that he's been blamed for stating, for leaking or saying certain things. I'm not sure that he actually did. I never heard him saying that. He didn't refute it, but I didn't hear him approving that. All those statements that he allegedly said there's resistance of the government to the deal. This is not true. But lack of satisfaction of leadership from negotiating team is correct. No, this has also been leaked. Okay, I'll put it this way. Negotiations is a difficult thing. You work with people such as Hamas, and it's difficult to get to solutions. For decades we failed. For decades they failed to reach an arrangement to bring back two people, Avera Mengistu and Hisham Masala, and two of our fallen Dal Gordon and Shaul Aron. For decades they refused to bring them back. They were not soldiers. They were just they had emotional and mental problems, and they crossed the border voluntarily, but they hold them for 10 years. Those psychopaths, those people. So at that particular point to remove them, leaving, but the military maneuver brought to release of 110 hostages alive and bodies. A military maneuver brought to that, and it just shows that we implemented power. If we wouldn't implement power, it wouldn't happen. We wouldn't send our sons to Jabalia to bring 7 bodies. So they would stay in the tunnel and be another on a run for 200 years. Because in the past they would become dust. But again, the military force reached Jabalia in this tunnel and managed to remove those people and brought them back, at least the understanding what happened to those people. You can't do that with deals. You can't do it. If the deal will lead to another release of hostages, and we agreed significantly, not us, I'm not the one who decides, the cabinet made decisions that were very difficult, really, to release murderers if such a deal will take place. Possibility of going back to the north of Gaza, which has a problemacy really. But we agreed. So many concessions that we're willing to. How long will it take? How long will it take? 5 more minutes. Oh, sorry. We have 5 more minutes.
אני רציתי רגע לשאול על לבנון,
I just want to ask you about
זה גם
Lebanon.
כולל שאלות מהקהל, או...
Do you have Q&A with the audience? Will we open it? Okay. I want to ask you about Lebanon. I heard you saying on channel 12, 10 kilometers. Is this the formula right now, 10 kilometers? This is standard that, let's put it this way. We would love Hezbollah to disappear, but it will not happen. So the minimum that will allow us to return with sense of security to the north, not to be shot at in their homes, and not to experience the penetration of Radwan forces to decapitate, killed, and to destroy the way Nukhba did. So the ground matter is obvious, but 10 kilometers been decided since this is the range of the anti-tank missiles that can hit. We don't have warnings against those missiles. Yeah, we don't have the Iron Dome that can intercept those missiles. Yeah, it's an anti-tank, very advanced, sometimes precision-guided weapons that can be launched within 10 kilometers of a distance. This is the minimal distance that we can agree upon in negotiations. If such negotiations will take place, that would allow the citizens to live without being visited by the anti-tank missile. But without reaching solution in Gaza, won't be able to address the north, because as you put it here, the war in Gaza can continue for quite a long time. So, in fact, the residents of the north on 1st of September 2026 may be returning home. Well, I said on Channel 12 that after Rafah, we will be completing the intense stage, the second stage according to the military analysis. And the stage B, in fact, will require us to coordinate our efforts in Rafah. But when it's over, within a few weeks from now, I think, you will see a focus, significant focus, dramatic focus in the north. All right, what did you want to ask, sir? Questions? You're willing? As many questions as possible. The audience, I would love to. So I will be repeating for the rest of every day. Barrages, I'm from the Galilee. I'm sorry, I cannot hear him. The panelists will be repeating the questions from the audience. What is your question, sir? As a statement, I wanted to address the importance of the concept of Shahid in current educational system, if I heard correctly. When you talk about the absolute victory, it's complete total nonsense, pardon me, sir, because there were always someone else who would like to be Nukhba, who would like to be. It will take them 100 years or 200 years, they will continue. Jihad is something that never stops. So this relative victory, maybe, instead of absolute victory, how about that? But only if you have a question, please. Well, if you have an exclamation mark in the question, you can't deliver it without an answer. I don't want to be dragged into judgmental statements, what is nonsense, what is not. You can be always, actually, you can always surrender, that's true, but we have a different approach, the way we had versus the Nazis, Daesh, or Al-Qaeda. I'm sure that many people that study in schools learn that being Shahid of Daesh or Al-Qaeda of ISIS is amazing. But our absolute victory is that we will not allow a military of the Hamas to control Gaza. That's our victory. More terrorists that think that Shahid is lovely, yeah, that's our fate, to fight them. But we have a very clear objective, and which minimal objective in this war, and we can't forget about it. Oh, we can stay here till night. I'm actually free, we can do that. What about the political horizon? I'm asking you about political horizon, sir. Why don't we have the diplomatic horizon or political horizon? If I may add, with Hamas?
לא, אבל...
No, you know,
למה
as a
אנחנו
state,
כל הזמן...
why ourselves?
אופק מדיני מול
What
מי?
do you mean? With
יש לנו
who?
6 הסכמי
We
שלום.
have 6 peace agreements. So what do you mean, sir? What are we doing during the next year? Within 10 years from now. As people of Israel, we need a horizon. We need a political and diplomatic horizon.
אני יכולה רגע להוסיף ולחדד, אנחנו כל הזמן מרגישים שכל הזמן ההנהגה שלנו אומרת לא.
Our leadership says no all the time, no to this, no to that, no to that. And in fact, there is absolutely nothing that presents a vision. So why we're in the current state of affairs where we do not allow others to be the refusals and we constantly look at those who refuse all the time, we've been stubborn, no, this is not, this is also no. But we suggest that what is yes, what can one do now?
דברי בקול רם.
Speak up. So the idea maybe not to look for the hostages, but maybe to look for those who are holding those hostages. So if you didn't hear the concept, why aren't we highlighting the other side and less our blame in this sense? When we're going to beat them up, the enemy. Well, just tonight we managed actually to kick them up. I hasn't been in the center of the good party for many years. You bring me back to the past I missed.
עוד שאלה? מספיק, אין זמן, זהו.
We don't have much time.
הסתבטתי פה בשאלה.
I was self-flagellation, saying no. We're not saying no all the time. I can tell you that very often they said yes to the Emirates. They even decided very challenging political decision of actually receiving this promise, a guarantee that will not annex Judea and Samaria. And I think in August, no, it was for 2 years. 4 years. August, it expires, so we can fix it. So then we can annex. So will you annex Judea and Samaria? This is another header. I highly do not recommend, but I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that. In fact, we say yes to many things. We don't know how to say no as well. Americans helped us in this war, and we said yes to them on humanitarian aid. And I am meeting almost every day, or correspond every day, or talk on the phone every day with the hostages' families, that there's a humanitarian decision of opening all the checkpoints and allow the humanitarian aid. Wounded their souls. All of the families of hostages said our children they're not even willing to show them to the Red Cross, and you provide them with you give them Nutella. But we didn't have a choice. It was important for us to tell to the Americans, yes, we are willing to help you, to help us. We can't continue this war without seeing humanitarian aid.
אבל זה תשובות טקטיות, השאלה פה...
It's a tactical question, the question...
אסטרטגית למה ישראל לא מייצרת איזשהו חזון.
Strategically, why Israel doesn't generate some kind of vision, not even a long term, only 5 years, the gentleman just wanted. There is a vision, and the vision is to be very strong, very strong. So they will not eradicate us, and to be very generous. When we talk about the possible peace agreements they did with Egypt, I tried to thwart it. By the way, I stood on the roof, and luckily for me, I didn't succeed, but we have a peace agreement for 40 years. We have Morocco, Jordan, and etc. Normalization, yeah, that's the business we need to be in. Yeah, that's what we want to say yes to. Thank you so much, all of you.
טוב, אני מבקש את משתתפי הפאנל
Okay, participants of the first panel,
לתפוס מקום.
take your seats.
בבקשה, יואל גוז'נסקי, אשר פרדמן,
Yoel Guzansky, Asher Ferdman, Aryeh, Alfred, and Truth Wasserman Landa, and I'll be the mediator.
טוב, אנחנו ממשיכים ברצף. אני אפנה קודם ליואל, למרות שאתם האורחים שלנו, אבל יואל בדרך לשדה התעופה, אז נתפוס אותו ממש ברגע האחרון, קצת לקח לנו יותר זמן ממה שחשבנו. ויואל, יש שתי נקודות שמעניין אותי לשמוע את דעתך לגביהן. אחד שמענו פה ככה בין השורות, שמשהו השתנה בין ה6 ל7 באוקטובר.
Something changed
אנחנו חוזרים לדיון על
in the context of normalization. We're going back to normalization as a topic. So what changed after 7th of October in the Saudis' vision of this topic? And whether still there is a possibility to reach this or that sort of normalization in the close period of time until the elections. Elections in the United States, before the campaign in the US becomes more intense. We have like 3 months or something. Well, hi, I'll try to answer those questions really. And one of the results of the war of 7th of October, that the cost of normalization became higher for Israel. I'm talking about the Palestinian context, and you can see that in different statements of the Saudis. The Saudi monarchy is aligning with the Arabic public opinion, and we know where they are right now. They're in a very bad historically place at that point, as far as I remember. Very few know, very few work on that the price for the Saudis changed as well. So normalization is on the table. Still there, not because of us, because of the American pressure, really. The price the Saudis are asked to pay in few aspects is climbed up. It's much higher price. The Saudis are forced to show involvement. Again, we don't know the details really at this point. But behind the curtains, under the table, they are required to show more involvement in the Palestinian arena, rehabilitation of Gaza. Some would say the Saudis also required to pay a price to the public opinion, the Palestinian opinion, the Arabic opinion, you know, and the service that Tzachi is doing in the Palestinian Authority and others at the Arabic Street. Among the Palestinian Saudis are maybe the least beloved country after the Emirates. This is pretty much the order. This is at the bottom of the sympathy. But it's important for them to gain the legitimacy from the Palestinians for their status in the Muslim world. 95% of the citizens in the Arabic countries in the Gulf as well against normalization, against the model of Abraham Accords. There was always a gap between the regimes that signed agreements with us and the civilians in those regimes, and this gap is just growing. And in order to get closer to the civilians standing, you see various expressions from the Saudis that we never heard before, very decisive, less vague statements. Before 7th of October, they had a sort of maneuvering of space they kept for themselves, so it was quite expanding, and the requirements from Israel were X. Now the X plus 1 honored. Those statements will be hard for them, the Saudis, to actually retract. I'm not sure what is X plus 1, what is X11. In the past, the requirement was something vague, some kind of vague promise of Israelis, according to Saudi sources. Again, some vague promise. Now they want irreversible steps towards creation of the Palestinian state. They don't want promises any longer. They want actual actions. They are fed up with the promises, as they say. And those declarations are binding for them. At a certain point, I guess, they will have to really back it up. But within a few minutes that I have before I run away, I want to look at the Saudis. What do they want? And one can actually say that the Saudis mostly want the Americans. The Saudis want the dividends from the Americans. They want to march forward the 2030 vision program that is actually quite stuck, and it's important for them to bring foreign capital and investment. Getting closer to the United States, that's what matters to them. Let's put it frankly on the table. We know that from previous agreements, all the strategic carrots that they asked for, some of them are very problematic for us, really. But this particular period of time, Mohammed bin Salman, if you would have asked him today, without anyone hearing, do you want normalization with Israel? Do you actually want it? He would say no. Per se, normalization, Israel and Saudis. But since they are under American pressure, and since they're getting all those toys he really desires, he will agree to normalization. You need to understand the spirits of this. We are coming from the Emirates. We are not very favorable there at that point among them. Israel is perceived as toxic. The wet dream of Ben Salman is to get everything he wants. He would have asked to improve his relationship with the United States to get everything he wants without normalization with Israel. Americans insist, not because of Israel, but because of the United States as well, to sell normalization in the Congress. In order to bring an agreement with the Saudis in Washington. Because the Saudis are toxic there, you need to bring Israel to the table. What are the advantages for us and for the Saudis? And what are the disadvantages of such a possible normalization agreement? So what will we get out of it? What Israel hopes to receive in normalization agreements? So first of all, the largest economy in the region. They're part of the G20. They want to become part of G8. Involvement in Gaza with God's help, really. They don't want to do that. It's a headache for the Saudis. And if you would ask them, they're really not interested. I'm not familiar with any Arabic state, maybe the Emirates, but we'll talk about that later on in the next panel. Israel will get legitimacy, political legitimacy in this region and above it. And it's also the Islamic legitimization. And Ronen mentioned that. Security components. Israel will receive a lot of components. We saw that on 14th of April, just a hint of it. And you can get much more, and those things are extremely important. Additional matter that Israel will receive is an improvement of its regional status of the United States. If the United States will manage to bring closer their Saudis and other Gulf countries, it will upgrade the status of the United States here in comparison to China and Russia, and will push away Tehran even further aside. What is the price Israelis have to pay? People constantly talk about the political price that Israel is supposed to pay. Israel has to say something that is binding this way or another about the Palestinians. The topic that I feel very passionately about and will work upon it in our think tank is a nuclear matter, proliferation. We know that the Saudis insist to enrich uranium in their territory, with American restriction, of course, and American supervision of different sorts, but still, even with American restrictions, is a taboo that will be broken. Other countries, some of our friends, some of North, will ask as well. The Emirates that gave up the uranium enrichment, what will they say when uranium will be enriched in Saudi soil? They will say, you know what, I want it as well, because I actually did agree to give up the enrichment of uranium in return for the reactors. So the weapons that are violating equilibrium, well, we may be capable of handling that, but it's also impacting our regional balance. What kind of model of normalization with the Saudi will be dictated? Is it the warm model? I would say it's almost the ultimate model that we have with the Emirates. I don't think so, really. I think the Saudis will be very gradual, very restricted. It will take years and years, and we'll receive maybe partial normalization, something that is called, by the way, they call it integration. They call it a regional integration, not normalization. It's quite an interesting choice of words, really. This is their choice, and it also, I think, shows the nature of the final product they intend to give us. You want to ask a question? I have another minute, but it may bring additional countries to the circle of normalization, because the Saudis is a barrier of the expansion of the circle. It's not just in this context, but it may be some kind of tiebreaker, you know. But I want to say something else. The strategic current situation of the State of Israel doesn't require us to bring some kind of strategic achievement that will be visible, very significantly highly visible, I don't know how to call it, with ramifications of the future of the region versus the main problem that we have in this region. It's still not the Hamas, it's Iran, really. And you mentioned that, of course. Yeah, I am an enthusiastic supporter of normalization. Even after the 7th of October, it still has advantages and prices we need to pay, and disadvantages as well. I think we need to pay those prices. I think I'm a supporter of normalization. If we'll reach the hostage deal and be able to declare end of war at high intensity, and the pictures from Gaza will calm down the public opinion of Arabic countries, making it much harder for the Saudis. They have to play the game with their audience and the other Arabic audiences, and makes it much harder for the Israelis. If we'll solve some of the so-called tactical issues, we'll be able to get to the strategic matter, inshallah. And we heard yesterday the Saudi foreign minister that said that the future of Israel will only if the Palestinian state will be created alongside of it. Whether will it be the only way? But I would like to move to you, Ruth. Ruth is the fellow researcher in Misgav Institute, by the way. I have only representatives of Misgav Institute, so look, isn't it lovely? We'll try to argue amongst ourselves. Yeah, we do that a lot, really, I'm sure. You're from Ra'anana, so it doesn't count, you know. So, the topic of this enterprise that is so expensive for the state of Israel, we saw that Mr. Hanegbi, the council, he was maneuvering here on this matter. So, what is so scary in the eyes of Israelis of stating that we will be willing for normalization with the Saudis to promote or to ignite a political process on the Palestinian arena? I don't understand this fear. I don't understand this horror of this statement. Can you explain to me what's so horrifying? I can try. So, there is a political fear to address a large audience that experienced a tremendous disaster on 7th of October. I think that it's very difficult to look into the eyes of people and to persuade them there is a partner. Personally, myself, I don't think that there is a partner there at this particular period of time. And this is difficult for me to state, really. I'm not saying it from the political... I'm saying it with fear. And that wasn't even a question, that was a statement, but it was a correct statement. Incitement, hatred, education, messages that are super anti-Israeli. And I'm an expert in Egypt. I lived for 3 years in Egypt. This is the country that in fact there is a peace agreement with. And I'm the last one to say that this is not strategically important, military important. We don't have war with the Egyptians, of course, but we never insisted to eradicate this hatred and incitement. And today we are in this certain situation, and if it's possible, by the way, can I undermine a little bit this maybe regular thinking, way of thinking, those little squares we all arrange in our heads, those frameworks of thinking that we're so inclined towards for so often, and we forgive ourselves this cliche thinking, we constantly follow this path, we fall into this particular direction. Let's try to create a different box. We are allowed, if we are in the field, in my vision, of course, and if someone wants from us X, and this X today is not to create any collateral damage, innocent civilians, humanitarian aid, sign peace agreements that in my eyes will not be normalization at all, really, but it will have other dividends, strategic dividends. For example, this front lines against Iran, which is obviously the source of all the problems.
אם אנחנו מסתכלים היום על כל מה שכולנו אומרים, אנחנו כל הזמן אומרים, המדינה הזאת לא יכולה לעשות בגלל דעת הקהל.
It can't be done because of the public opinion. Arabic public opinion is against us. That's true. It's an axiom. the public opinion of Arabic communities against. They hate us. The public and the streets can't stand us. They are fed constantly into their veins with hatred, mad, insane hatred, to such an extent that it allows them, a child, he's not a child, he's a man, will be calling his mother and will bragging that he murdered this and that many Jews. It reaches a psychotic level of hatred. And we are, from the other hand, do not see this card or this requirement as part of the general game we play here. So it's a chess game at that point. So we're undermining for a second why we cannot demand that. Part of our requirements will be the halt of this insane, delusional incitement, not just in Gaza, but also in Judea and Samaria and Jordan, where, by the way, in the Eastern Jerusalem, which is obviously not that violent, but it's also quite horrible, less than Gaza Strip there, but Judea and Samaria and Jordan, but Judea, Samaria, and Jordan and Gaza are the worst, but what about Egypt? I agree with you completely. But again, I will be getting to the point. I'm not running away from the question, really. One of the things that you mentioned here, towards Palestinian state or entity, Palestinian entity, I didn't use those terms. Palestinian horizon. Yeah, political horizon for the Palestinians. That's the term. I'm not afraid of this word. I am not afraid of this word, but again, to such an extent, let's put on the table all the conditions that you discussed. There is certain conditions that are extremely legitimate, which is demilitarization. That is very difficult. It seems for us that, okay, demilitarization, so in fact you don't really want some kind of political horizon. No. One can state political horizon. We don't actually, and it's been said, by the way, by the chairman of the Council of National Security, not myself, but the person who is in fact, he can't really be concerned with his intentions. He doesn't want parts of land of Israel or state of Israel. He said, yes, definitely, we don't want military occupation or military presence forever in Gaza, yeah. So maybe we are willing to allow and facilitate political horizon and something different. So what kind of Palestinian entities, Palestinian families, what kind of families in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, facing this challenge? Anyone who is an expert on Arabic culture, no, it's an impossible situation. We need a period of time, and we shouldn't be ashamed of that. And a decade of preparations of renewal messages. So we want to build a path into the future for the next horizon that is practical and possible. But why shouldn't we say that? Did we kill someone? Did we rape someone? Did we hurt someone? Maybe on a political aspect, but it seems to me that in return for those things, I think that one should be stating that we're willing to face the political horizon. Okay, thank you. I'm asking in Hebrew and you will be answering in English. So let's go back. Aryeh, by the way, is one of those people that are currently... I think we should replace the mediator. So Aryeh, you're constantly in touch, economically speaking.
שמענו פה בין השורות ולא לגמרי הבנתי שמשהו השתנה בראייה שלהם בין השישה לשבעה באוקטובר. אתה יכול לרגע לשתף אותנו בתור אחד שנמצא במגעים עם סעודים ועוסק בעניינים שמתחברים לאירוע?
Sorry for my Hebrew. I live in Renana. Yeah, זה יותר קל. I spend more time in Saudi Arabia than in Renana. I think to just give context to this, after the Abraham Accords, or as they began on August 13, 2020, the feeling in the Middle East in all of the countries, or many of the countries, was a question of when and not if. And depending on the timing of when was the level of enthusiasm that the street or the participants in these various countries had to connect with Israel in what I would call warm peace, not in cold peace. There wasn't an issue of that. If you would have asked in January 19th of 2021, so the day before President Biden took office, if you were to be in Riyadh, you would have heard from the people in Riyadh, not here and not here, but here, you would have heard that we are interested in normalization. On January 21st, after President Biden's inaugural address, they said we are not interested in normalization, but it might happen anyways. The reason is because in President Biden's inaugural address, he said that he was going to make the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, a pariah, an enemy of the United States of America. And America is the key linchpin of how these agreements came about and will continue to exist. A year went by, and it became not only it might happen, but we're less interested in it happening. And October 6th and 7th have almost nothing to do with this. And since October 7th, not on the day, but in 5 months past, I was in Saudi on Wednesday last week. The answer was, we are not interested in peace with Israel. This is not something that we want. But if the leadership decides, I hope that we get a lot for it. And the answer is if we think in America, where I follow most of the news, it's about 85% negative towards Israel and about 15% positive. In the Middle East, in Saudi specific, it's 99.9999999% negative, and the other 0.0001 is a glitch in the algorithm. Just to understand, I'll give you, can I give one? And I was interviewed on Sky News Arabia the week after October 7th, so it must have been the 15th or 16th. And I don't do interviews in Arabic because I don't speak Arabic, slicha. But I had a friend on who was going to translate with me to make sure the translation was authentic. The first question was, isn't it fair that so many Jews were raped on October 7th because of all of the Israeli soldiers that had raped Palestinians for the last 30 years? So I said, I apologize. Can you translate that again? That can't be an accurate translation. And they translated it again. It was the right translation. I said, I apologize. I thought I was on a news station, not on Hitler's propaganda network, and I hung up. I did not think they were going to call me back. They did. A week later, they called me back, and I was prepared. They did a study and came out with a documentary, How Racist Are Israeli Soldiers? This is the pro-Western Gulf network. So how racist are Israeli soldiers? Every other case of occupation, there's systematic rape of soldiers of the local people. Israeli soldiers are so racist, they will not rape the locals. So I began the conversation with asking, are they familiar with the documentary that they came out with? You can have it one way or the other, and the answer is that unless somebody's going to call, as we say in America, balls and strikes, say the difference between emet and sheker, these lies just run, and they continue to run. And this is a challenge. The positive part, and you didn't ask me this, but I'll get to this. This can flip in a second. If you go to Saudi and you ask in any room, who has a driver's license for longer than 7 years, there won't be a single woman lift up their hand. If you ask who has been to a cafe with their husband or their girlfriend, there won't be anybody in the room, not boy or girl, who's raised their hand if it's been more than 8 years. The change goes from literally day to day. I was there 6 times since October 7th. Each time is radically different. This can change with the right leadership. I have a lot more to say, but that wasn't your question.
אתה בעצם אומר
So in fact, you're basically saying that in the end, the decision of the crown prince, whatever he decides, everyone will be following.
Right?
כן.
And it depends who will be the president of the United States. Aryeh, another question I would like to ask you. Is it correct that we need to look differently upon the normalization agreement with the Saudis in comparison to the Abraham Accords and normalization with the Abraham Accord? Is it the same? Or is it something completely different?
I'll be very clear about this. I wake up every morning and I pray that President Biden will be the greatest president of my lifetime because that's good for America. I'm a Republican. I didn't vote for him and I won't vote for him. But if he's the greatest president, it's good for the world. So far, those prayers have not gone in the direction that I've wanted, from my perspective. When the Biden administration couldn't use the word Abraham Accords, right, until the day after the Afghanistan debacle, and then have not called the ambassadors from the Abraham Accord countries into the White House to honor them, right? And when we, the U.S., didn't call Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed the day after the rocket attack, the whole premise of the Abraham Accords, not the Trump Accords, not the Republican Accords, but the Abraham Accords that countries signed on to, being bipartisan, peace for peace, being something that all Americans would embrace, is gone. The question is what will exist in the future, and that's a very fascinating question. There's a pathway where Saudi should be part of that, and you'll have 15 other countries join. I want to mention two things that I think is incredibly important. I sit in this room with heroes of the Jewish people. I know a lot of your resumes. It's an incredible thing that in the last 2,000 years we couldn't even contemplate. And I sat here for an hour listening to Israel thinking that it is a spectator in its own history. And that was incredibly sad to me. What will these guys do for us, or what will those guys do for us? That's not the Israel that I know. It's not the Israel that I love. It's not the Israel that I respect, frankly. There were, for 4 years, the key to the Middle East ran through Jerusalem. The last 3.5 years, the key to the Middle East runs away from Jerusalem. And until that changes, everything you're talking about is irrelevant. And Israel has the ability to reframe that if you choose to do that. It's certainly within your ability.
Okay, thank you.
Asher, okay, your turn. So we do talk all the time about this bilateral approach. Us and the Palestinians for many years we had a bilateral approach, and now we're trying to maintain some kind of this. So we do have the American engine. We're trying to maintain a bilateral approach with the Saudis and through which to change the Middle East. Maybe a different approach is required. Thank you. I also want to thank you for this fruitful discussion between two of the think tanks. I agree with Aryeh and Yoel about the situation. Instead of being optimistic, we need to be creative. And in fact, because of the very negative public opinion, because of the price is higher, I disagree that it's only some kind of general intention. I think the Saudis want actually irreversible steps, not necessarily the recognition of the Palestinians by specific steps, and the cease of warfare, which will be a catastrophe for the state of Israel to stop fighting now when Hamas has still remained its sovereign. It's very possible, unfortunately, that under current situation, and we'll see what happens after the elections, we can't move forward with a bilateral route. That means that we can't move forward. There are ways that will be under or above the bilateral with the players from other directions, and again, it's a multilateral process, and there are very significant processes that are happening in the Middle East, and this is the IMEC corridor, Europe and Middle East corridor that will be connecting in a vision the West and the East. Trade, transportation, logistics, energy, and media and communications. So here in Israel, we're really used to seek various initiatives that remain just a declaration, but here as well, this is something that's actually happening in front of our eyes. And the Indians want it tremendously, but also the American interest, because it can be an alternative to the Chinese BRI channel, and the Indians and the Saudis and the Emirates, they sit together, they signed agreements. And you need to bear in mind that the Saudis agreed to open the aerial space for the Israeli airlines. They didn't say that because we love Israelis, we want to promote normalization with Israel. No, they said we want to be a transportation hub on a global level. Therefore, we must open an aerial space for all the airlines. The advantage in IMEC initiative and additional initiatives of this sort that it may allow the Saudis to say, okay, no, so, okay, it's not about normalization with Israel still, where there is war and etc. But since we want to be a part of this initiative that can change the Middle East and the world, we must allow the lorries or energy from Israel or commodities go through our territory. The problem is that the state of Israel is not willing, and I think at this particular moment there are hundreds of Jordanian and Egyptian lorries that are waiting at the border because we can't, we don't have an ability to receive them. It was an Nitzana checkpoint, and they don't have phones with the Egyptian side there. We send each other notes there, so we want to be part of it, which is emerging right now in front of our eyes. We must pull ourselves together and to decide that our regulation bureaucracy will be alleviated, so we'll be participating in those great projects. On the low below the ground of bilateral, political, and diplomatic full relationships, we need to look at the interim steps that are public, that are not under the table, because it's happening anyway, but something that is less declarative than actual diplomatic relations. It can be steps that are restricted and limited to certain geographical areas, whether it's Bali in Indonesia or Binyam in Saudi Arabia. It can be some interim step for commodities, French commodities, with Jordanian drivers and Jordanian lorries that are passing through Israel, for example. So maybe some things that it's important to promote at this particular stage, maybe, even if it is not a full bilateral diplomatic relations. And as someone else said here, the involvement of third parties is crucial in this point, and Aryeh didn't mention that, but he is a special envoy of the American administration for economical peace. Then America were willing to invest, not just the Americans, the Indians, the British, the Asian countries as well. A lot of our capacities to promote things, considering the tension that exists because of the war, will be dependent to our allies, to what extent we'll manage to persuade our allies to be involved. And therefore, by the way, if President Biden will be re-elected, it's one thing. But if it will be President Trump or former President Trump will be re-elected, then the biggest challenge will be of how can we persuade the American administration that continuation of the investment and encouragement of integration is actually integration and normalization. It's also an American interest that will be serving America first. I think it's possible, really, because it's an alternative to China, and it's actually and this is a challenge. How can we encourage the normalization in this sense?
בסך הכל יש מגוון רחב של אינטרסים משותפים שכן מהווים תשתית טובה לקדם הסכם כמו נורמליזציה והסכמים.
And how can we promote those agreements that are expanded and in general? Now we're stuck with this war, and we heard that from the National Council, National Security Advisor. We need to prove that we know how to address Hamas and in general being an asset. Again, I want to talk about your approach, the asset, State of Israel as an asset, yourself, ma'am. You in Cairo and you served in Egypt, and we were perceived as an asset in this region. That was a result of the fact that allegedly Israel considered to be then a very stable country. Israel guaranteed, promised that they know how to contain the Palestinians, to push them to the corner, that Israel was the only one that faced Iran and its proxies and coped with them proudly, and the rest just looked away. And suddenly our level is we're not the strongest, we can't cope our problems on our own. How will it impact we don't have the privilege of actually choosing it. So what do we do? No one is looking for a weak ally. So obviously I should have said that before. I'm sorry, we have a little bit of a technical difficulty. So no one wants a weak ally. No one is looking at us as weak. They don't need us when we are weak. If we will not clarify in a very clear manner that we're capable of winning, which is quite a difficult trap for us, but it's necessary for so many reasons, really. Saudis are looking at us and they intend to normalize, or not, by the way, when we talk about India is flirting lovely with Iran, Egypt. Egypt that hates Iran is flirting with Iran at that point. So these flirtatious behaviors with Iran, because of the current very visual weakness of the United States, we must make sure not just the deterrence, but there's some kind of a decisive result. I don't believe that a decisive tactical victory versus Hamas is enough. It's not tactical, really. And it's a strategic game. And I would say we need a prominent result. Because otherwise it's just a distraction that Iran created. Strategy should be much more expanded than just a tactical victory over Hamas. And what makes me quite concerned is the fact that we don't have such a strategy. We don't have enough of a good partners for the strategy, really. But the elements, clear-cut elements of the very initial components of the decisive strategic victory, this is first of all the full submission of Hamas. We don't have any other ability. So we must reach a decisive and prominent result. A defeat of Hamas. Aryeh, I would like to ask you, pardon my French, but I'm not sure whether you will understand it in Hebrew or not. It's called Fata Morgana. Biden administration sells us a story. Just say yes. Just take the train of normalization. Everything will be hunky-dory. It will be end of war, return of hostages, we'll calm down the north. We will push Hezbollah 20 kilometers from the border up to north. Iran will be all giddy and laughing happily, and they will cease using the proxies and the proxy war. Everything will be hunky-dory. I can't believe how we'll all fit into one picture.
No. Oh, slicha.
I just told my kids that I was doing it in Hebrew. No.
Look, there is a, first of all, even if, let's just imagine that my kid went to sleep last night, lost a tooth. I put money under the pillow. The tooth fairy is real. It wasn't me. So the tooth fairy has now sold you this story that this is all possible. And by the way, I've sat on the other side of the table. I know what happens in the United States of America wants one of our friends to do something. The tools in our tool belt are expansive and extensive and very, very hard to resist. The pressure, assuming that this is what President Biden wants to do, are enormous. And don't minimize that for a second, no matter how humorous I find the thing is. Let's assume that it worked. Just for a moment, let's assume that it worked. There's something else that we're forgetting altogether. Winston Churchill describes moments in history as a hinge of history, where the whole world can go this way or the whole world can go that way, depending on the activity. When Israel makes peace with Saudi Arabia correctly, the world as we know it is forever changed. Not partially changed, not sort of changed, not integratsia, but the entire world is different and will be forever different more. This is like going to the supermarket and having a 20% coupon. It makes you feel good for about a minute. It is to me insulting and displays a lack of knowledge of the region that these things can happen, and as long as it lasts long enough for us to not be here anymore, that this would work. And all of the people in the region know that's the same thing. They just don't say it out loud. And it behooves the leadership of Israel and the people of Israel and both of your incredible organizations just to speak the truth. This is what it's for. And again, even if it were to work, it would not be good, and it won't work, so it is worse. And if you want to look just more specifically about this moment, I can't undersell this. The vibe, my wife gets upset with me because I love Saudi Arabia a lot. And she says, why? I said, well, it's just like Tel Aviv, but the girls wear more clothes. Okay, that was funnier in my house. The enthusiasm about tomorrow is far more than to put up with the aggravation of today. Every country has its problems today. If you're excited about tomorrow, you're willing to deal with today's garbage to be able to get to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That Israel and Saudi have in common. If you can take UAE and Bahrain and Saudi and Israel, that will eventually resolve all of your problems. The rising tide will indeed raise all ships. The best thing for the Palestinians should be rooting for this to happen. But we also know, and it would behoove everybody here to say this very clearly, nobody actually cares about the Palestinians. Certainly not anybody telling Israel what to do, because if they did, they would be rooting for you to destroy Hamas. But they're not. They're rooting for you to stop, so Hamas stays in power. We built a pier. Why did we build a pier? How did Israel allow America to build a pier? Like, these are nonsensical things that if you don't say them out loud, people start believe them. So now you've got this whole sipur that all of these things can happen, and now if you stand up against it, you're against peace. You're not a believer. We let all of these non-truths add up, and suddenly you start talking about the tooth fairy enough that suddenly people start believing it's a disaster.
Okay, thank you.
So last but not the least in our panel, Asher, I would like to ask you a question in the context of the previous question. Can it actually congeal? Is there a way using which we can recruit the Arabic countries to take responsibility for Gaza, for the rehabilitation, for stabilization of Gaza? It really depends upon us, because those countries, in fact, they know very well who Hamas are. They have no illusions about who they are. We have more illusions about Hamas than them. They're not going to adopt Hezbollah model of having an actual technocratic and, I don't know, Palestinian Authority, international coalition government, whatever you call it, when Hamas is remaining as an actual real dominant power underground. But if Hamas will still continue to exist, but it won't be a dominant power in the field, it's possible. By the way, there's a very interesting discussion. Someone said that I think it was the Emirates said yes, and Saudis will say no, maybe yes, but the younger crown prince is more, I don't know, he has all the aspirations, ambitious, and etc. Because Gaza is quite a project. But I think those countries can be very ambitious in this sense, and they understand the value of Gaza. That is a stabilized factor. If for it to succeed, for NEOM to succeed, Saudis require this stability in the region in order to attract international investment. So it's actually a scenario that is possible. Israel can actually obtain the roles they wanted to dismantle the Hamas regime and etc. Maybe the parties will be willing to participate, but truthfully, even people maybe would have wanted to do that or don't think that the two-state solution is the best solution. They will never step in without the Palestinian legitimacy that they will receive. They will not join if they will perceive as someone who is actually undermining the national aspirations of Palestinian people. It shouldn't be necessarily just the Palestinian Authority. But yeah, collapse of the Hamas governance for sure, not to have Hamas running around, and they need the legitimacy of Palestinians, the clan, maybe the clans or local factors that will allow them to be part of it. So thank you so much, Ruth, Aryeh, Asher. Just one thing in common in understanding of all of us, that the main goal, immediate goal of ours is to happening after 7th of October. And what is happening with normalization with the countries that we have peace with? And I wanted to start with my friend who is an ambassador, first ambassador of Israel in the Emirates after the declaration of peace. And today is when the first ambassador to Bahrain. So he's well familiar with the field, but he has a problem with the word normalization. And I want him to explain why he doesn't like this term normalization. So the problem that I have is not mine really, and this is something that has more problems for the Arabic countries. The word to normalize is an actually very negative. It's a pejorative for those who support normalization or connections with Israel, and they bothered and they actually take a photo. I'm sorry, there is a technical problem with the microphone. Just a second. So the term normalization is unacceptable.
הגעתי מאיחוד האמירויות, הייתי שם ממונה זמני,
השגריר. Is unacceptable. What's so negative about this term?
אני חושב שהיא קנתה לה איזושהי
I think it received some kind of a negative concept behind it. In Bahrain, what was abnormal before, that's what they mean.
אני גם חושב שלמשל...
So I think it's... If you ask in the Emirates, you see the relationships. You can have diplomatic relations, and that's what we have. And you can build relationships, which is a long-term project and a different type of labor. What Abraham Accords did in first, on the practical aspect, they created diplomatic relations between countries they didn't have relations with us. So, and of course, there was a mental change and with the Emirates.
לא בצורה רחבה כמו באיחוד האמירויות בבחריין.
As like in Emirates and Bahrain, and it was almost mutual. There was quite an excitement in the Emirates, and here the curiosity, the hello Jews said by them in a very positive way. It was, I remember when I was in Dubai, it was very... But I want to start, in addition to this analysis, semantic analysis between normalization as a derogatory term in Arabic or integration or partnership, which is slightly different matter. I think that when it comes to what I heard from Abdallah Ben Zayed, that when the Emirates look at the future, they talk about partnership. Economical partnership, what do you mean? Security partnership. I'll explain. Let's describe to ourselves. Let's imagine the missile night without Abraham Accords that allowed, by the way, the CENTCOM and General Guerrilla, they to lead this preventative attempt in the skies of the Middle East from the expanded perspective. So this is a legal cooperation that is necessary, and I think that the challenge, our challenge, and again, for 3 years I'm in the field already, to translate this security structure of cooperation under this very skillful conductor, CENTCOM, into terms of other realities, economical terms, civilian terms. And I would like to stop here, and I will be turning the finger upon ourselves, because we have 2 obstacles, and those who talked here before me, they mentioned that. First of all, the public opinion in the Arabic countries indeed is a barrier. It's indeed a barrier, and I think in any future agreement, I'm just corresponding to the previous panel that we will have with the Saudis or other countries. We do have to invest a lot of thought, even to require that as part of the agreements or in other formulation, an attempt on behalf of the country that is entering the agreement in topics of education. We talked about that. We talked about de-radicalization. Was a great success, by the way, in the Emirates. Yeah, relatively, the people that are working on it. I had a conversation, very interesting conversation, done with the Bahraini Minister of Education. He talked about removing all the anti-Semitic content from the textbooks. He talked about the studies of the Holocaust and the different delegations that will go to Poland and to Yad Vashem, to the museum here. Introduction into the curriculum. The whole topic of the objective attempt to present Israel and Arabic relationship in the 20th century. So there was an under-assessment that I called immediately to the office of the Prime Minister, to the sub-minister who was in charge of that. It wasn't Bahrain or Emirates, it was Bahrain. And I said, we're marching up. They issued the textbooks and the parents received them and the story fell between them because of the very harsh resistance of the parents. And of course, there was an education attempt. But there was obviously a decision from top to bottom. And it's not just about them, it's also about us, whether we can call it normalization or integration. And what matters is not what we did, but what are we actually doing. Minister of Foreign Affairs and other entities, I think not everyone is understanding the importance of the Abraham Accords. People really understand, no, they got into it completely. Governmental institutions, I don't think all the ministries adopted the spirit of Abraham Accords. So, not everyone is on the same page here. I was in the Minister of Finance, and I was amazed that they didn't have one meeting dedicated to the question of ramifications of Abraham Accords upon the Israeli economy. I think it's a key event. And today we're looking for the substitutes of Turkish products today. A significant part of those products can be found in Bahrain, in the Emirates, and in Saudi Arabia. There are also willingness, well, even in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, there's a willingness to export that, because the State of Israel here, we have the Standards Institute. No one bothered to look whether they're willing to grant the standards. We import almost all of our steel from Turkey, and now we have this completely empty well in front of us, and we have this catch-22 in front of us with the Institute of Standardization of Israel. We must grant everything that enters Israel. We need to test it, but we can't really travel to the country where the Council of National Security warns us that it's actually dangerous. I can send them to the Emirates or maybe to Jordan or the South. I can't do that. So the Minister of Economics really wants, again, the minister really wants, all the ministers, they really want it, they want to import. And we have the transportational corridor, and we said, and Asher was very exact, with all due respect, there is such an ability to contain of 250 lorries at the bridges of Jordan. The majority of them are going to Gaza today, so even if they want to create here all this abundance, not necessarily we're able to absorb it. Is it the Institute of Standardization? No, that was just an example of a need when we talk about normalization. And of course, as the State of Israel, how can we contain that? And of course, I see here people from the Foreign Affairs, I think people from other ministries that used to work in security, I see people from ministry here and from the Ministry of Economics. We have people from different ministries, very important ministries. That we're not on the same page. When I was in Abu Dhabi, and on the agenda there was done a double taxation agreement, which is the biggest barrier before signing that, the Minister of Finance. They decided that Mubadala, Adyr, and a whole list of wealth funds. They are not a longer hand of the Emirates government, which is absurd because obviously it's them. It's more than absurd, really. It's ridiculous. I had to bring in Moshe Kachlon in order to remove those friends from this very high tree upon which they climbed. When we talk about normalization, we can talk about it, we can have academic conferences, but in the end, we need people that will interpret that into realities, hospitals that will be accepting doctors and giving them permits to work here and study, academic world that will be, I hear here Moran Zaga, one of the leading, biggest experts on the Gulf countries. How many like how we have here? Whether the universities are taking this profession seriously. I studied the Middle East in the university, and I had a professor that passed away. He was the expert in Israel on the Gulf countries. How many like that we have today after my professor passed away? For example, this is one of the examples. This is, in fact, again, we invested enough, we didn't budget enough, the Abraham Accords. That there was an expanded attempt. And by the way, to connect those agreements into one bundle and to connect it to the Abraham Accords. And of course, the mental change we all experienced when I came to the Emirates. And I was appointed as the first Israeli diplomat. It was published in the media. I received the endless list of messages from Mauritania and Pakistan. It was received with so much joy from Iraq, Shia population, etc. And when we talk about the Saudis, for example, the importance of creating diplomatic relations with the Saudis will be to remove this last stumbling block, and we can't exaggerate the importance really and of the future agreement with the Saudis and economical relations, and of course. And this is some kind of block that we have among the Arabic world in the relationships on Israel. We can't exaggerate the importance of such an agreement. So obviously the Minister of Defense and Ministry, Moshe Sharet in the past said in the 50s that the military, they are always leading. And the only country we were in touch with then was Turkey in the Muslim world, but it's today Ministry of Defense sends the people to open the embassies here with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the only one in the field. So you can actually see the government of Israel as any government, by the way. I have extreme examples. What does it mean to normalize, really? We can invite them to open the biblical contest last time. They didn't want to do that. What was it? But there is actually a place. It's not about inviting them to be the one that will be opening the biblical quiz in Israel, but we could have prepared better. People didn't talk about normalization, creation, the diplomatic relationships with Bahrain and the Emirates, really. But today, when this matter with the Saudis on the agenda, we need to contain and we need to include so many entities and to even recognize the differences, understand the differences between those countries, their relationships, the potential of what is possible and what can be done, whether it's an economical topic and on other topics as well, education and etc. All the fields where we have advantages, relative advantages, where we encounter the bureaucratic wall. I served for 4 years in the National Council of Security when the Prime Minister then created the task force on India and task force on China. And I think today those things are in the open and they're not underground really. But I can say that, yeah, we need to create such an entity and to have someone in charge in order to prepare for the next big thing. I completely agree with you, and I think this is a very good point. And now we'll be moving to the only academic expert in Israel, Dr. Moran Zaga. She is a lecturer in Haifa University, but her specialization is normalization, integration of the Emirates and how will it impact and with God's help I want to jump into the future after the war. Do you see the role in the post-war Gaza of the Emirates?
תודה וברכות על המכון.
Well, congratulations for everything you did here.
איחוד האמירויות הייתה מדינה שאנחנו מכירים אותה מהשנים האחרונות כמדינה מובילה.
We know that the Emirates had been undermined in its original status and very much impacts its involvement during the war. And let's look at the Emirates and the relationship between the Emirates and the Saudis. Those connections very much impacted by the role of the Emirates in the region. We can talk about the Emirates and Iran and United States, of course, which are also relationships that knew ups and downs. And as Aryeh said, those changes impact tremendously the way they behave when it comes to Israel-Palestinian matters. The Emirates, because they took upon themselves slowly lower role with all the geopolitical changes that happened after the war. I think the Saudis getting the mandate from the Americans to lead this regional forum, and they do it big time. Qatar is a team player. Qatar is not a Zionist state that is working in Gaza. They need to work together with other countries now and to align. This is really hard for the Emirates, and they recalculate the route anew. So they take a step back, and in something they're actually moving forward, but it's very complicated. Humanitarian aid, for example, they're leading the effort, they are leading in the field, and there's no undermining that. But again, it doesn't go for the day after question. As a country that up to now they were leading, I would expect them to present us a vision of how they see the day after in Gaza. And up to now, there's no such a public vision. Maybe it exists, but again, it's all under the table, and a lot of work is done as well on different forums that are more secretive, where the Emirates bring up ideas and suggestions, but they didn't suggest Dahlan, they didn't receive the involvement that Israel suggested them to manage civilian aspects of the Gaza Strip. And the Arabic League, they didn't lead such a conversation. They sent a lower rank, really. There are problems indeed. They sent the mayor, the prime minister, not the president. And therefore, the Emirates are currently playing the role of the part of, and behind the curtain, they are pulling into stronger directions. And I know that they're copying the Chinese model. And I think because of their presence in the field, they want to dictate infrastructure. And they bought territory, they're building ports, and it's that they're copying the Chinese model. They're bringing fresh water to people, you know, for people from Gaza. They hated so much the Emirates. And there was a right statement here that the Palestinians in the Arabic world hate the Saudis and the Emirates more than anything else. Today, the potable fresh water they drink, this is the water that they are desalinating for them. And there is complete coordination between the Emirates and the military Israeli coordination institution of Mohammed bin Zayed, Abdullah bin Zayed, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, invited the head of opposition, which is a statement. So it's not political level between the states, but not the governments. So on the governmental level, we see different statements. Sometimes there's a little bit of flipping finger on Emirates' side. But when it comes to working ranks, the coordination is amazing. Cooperation is absolutely perfect. They are the only sovereign country in Gaza Strip that are allowed to create infrastructure and to be present freely in the Strip, besides the international organizations, all the other countries that want to bring today merchandise to Gaza or products to Gaza, they need to actually download it at the entry to the Strip. But they have water and they have a hospital there. So they do intend to prepare themselves for an important role after the war. Again, so they took the humanitarian topic and they said, okay, we'll be addressing it because this is the time, this is the fire we need to put out. But when it comes to the future and building the future the way one should do, we want first of all to see what our colleagues in the Arabic world suggest, what Israel can do, and who will be the people. That's extremely important for them. What will be the Palestinian leadership, because they will never accept to work with any Palestinian leadership. It's always a matter of leadership. It's always the personal matter. It's always focusing the personal aspects. Personal aspects of Netanyahu, of Abu Mazen, of Muhammad Mustafa. That's the Arabic world. Who are the world people that you will be working and not will be working? It can be a barrier for them. And as the media said, that's the Arabic world. I think it's in Israeli interest as well to allow the Emirates to take the main stage. And don't you think that they're preparing Dahlan like the hair of their whole infrastructure they're building now, even if it's not necessarily permanent infrastructure? They never crowned him. Dahlan is also very cautious, and very short time after the beginning of the war, he said that he has no intentions of being the head of Palestinian leadership. But they're definitely using him. He's part of the conversation then when the Emirates need to find a way around Gaza. So Israel opened the gates, but the local entities that they will be communicating are usually Dahlan's people, in fact, and he helps to do that. And his wife Jalila, she has humanitarian organizations there. So Dahlan is in the picture, but the fact that he's been currently crowned as heir, that's not there, or still not there. Let's move to our neighbors. Ophir Winter is leading research of INSS. Peace in the Name of Allah, Israelic Discourse is the book that he wrote.
מעניין מאוד. עכשיו, השאלה שלי כזאת. אתה חושב שמצרים וירדן רוצים
and Egypt want us to normalize relationship with the Saudis? Do they want it? We have an empty chair. We're supposed to have here someone who will represent Jordanians. I was supposed to be an Egyptian, but it can be both, really. And I was supposed to have here other representatives, but they did share their understandings. So when we talk about Egyptians and Jordanians, they are the first two countries that signed peace treaties with Israel, but today they are very much interested in normalization between Israel and the Saudis more than they were interested before 7th of October. And I'll try to explain why. Maybe in order to understand why, we need to go back to the Abraham Accords that were discussed so thoroughly. What was it? President Assisi was the first one to welcome Abraham Accords. But in practicality, Egypt was quite ambivalent. First of all, since peace Abraham Accord were too warm of peace agreements, differently from the Egyptian model of cold peace. And the second matter, that the Gulf countries were suddenly in the center, pardon me, both of you, but I remember the Egyptians, the WhatsApps I received from my friends in Egypt then, with different camels that they sent me in order to express their standing towards the people from Emirates. They had this fear of missing out. FOMO, that's what they had. Yes, suddenly Egyptians became at the margins and the Emirates were in the center. And Jordan was quite neutral when it came to Abraham Accords, and they also had a problem. First of all, the Palestinian component that is marginally humble in those accords, and from the other hand, to a certain extent, this warm economical peace between the Gulf countries was supposed to be between Jordan and Israel. That was the original vision of King Hussein. Warm peace that was very much neglected and cooled down besides the aspects of security and military cooperation. That's true, they did flirt a little bit with the idea. Prosperity green and blue, electricity and water under the protectorate of the Emirates, and now it's been postponed.
סעודיה, על נורמליזציה.
And of course, we'll talk about integration.
שוב פעם, המרכיב הפלסטיני הדל.
The Palestinian component that was quite scared.
צריך להגיד, הנושא הפלסטיני מבחינת שתי המדינות האלה, זה נושא שהוא ביטחון לאומי.
Topic, and for those countries, it's actually a matter of national security. Jordan with the Palestinian population that is very large, and Egypt with the border with Gaza, and they both see the Saudis as their last leverage upon the Palestinians to get something from Israelis on the Palestinians.
ירדן היה לה גם עוד חשש גדול בנושא ירושלים.
And Jordanians were also quite concerned with Jerusalem, maybe through the agreement with the Saudis. The Israelis will defranchise them from the special role that they have in the peace agreement in the holy places of Islam in Jerusalem. So, and the Mohammed bin Salman, a very powerful leader, will be not just the one who will be protecting Mecca and Medina, will take Jerusalem. So, what happened now? Why don't you want him? But they were afraid that we'll banish them from Jerusalem and will. But now, on 7th of October, the Palestinian component, as we heard here during the previous panels, when we talk about that, is extremely significant. It includes some kind of, as Saudis want, Israeli commitment that is more specific towards the two-state solution. This is something that the Egyptians and the Palestinians and the Jordanians love. Both countries understood that the status quo on the Palestinian arena is dangerous for the stability of the region and their own interests as well. For example, economical matters. Well, there was a report published this month on behalf of the UN that Egyptians are about to lose because of the war between $5.5 billion at the positive scenario to $20 billion in the negative scenario. In what sense? Because they build more borders. Both countries absorb losses when it comes to economical masses because of Houthis at the Red Sea and the way it ramificates upon the Suez Canal traffic. The fees dropped at 50%, which ramificates obviously upon the Aqaba Bay. The tourism in both countries was quite infringed. There is a theory that I read in the Egyptian newspaper that they say that Gaza and Giza sounds the same to foreign tourists, so they don't come to see the pyramids because they feel it's too dangerous. So, yes, I'm not sure it's a scientific explanation or not, but branding, branding is a powerful thing. And the last topic, because of which they actually do want the normalization at that point, is they intend to weaken the Islamistic pro-Iranian axis, not to give them this local success. We heard here before that maybe the best solution of Hamas to prevent normalization is to actually maintain normalization. This is how they perceive as an attempt to create a more moderate regional order that will be more suitable for them. And the last comment that I have to say that Egypt and Jordan are not very enthusiastic about the normalization between the Israelis and the Saudis, and it will be hard for them to step out against it because the Americans, they're the sponsors for them. And the Saudis are as well just recently declared that they will be investing into Egypt $15 billion in development of the Red Sea region, $8 billion that the Egyptian citizens sent as remittances, those that work in Saudi Arabia. So there is such a dependence. Whether there is such a dependence, if there is such a dependence, why don't we demand more from the Egyptians when it comes to Gaza matter, and not some kind of necessarily. And not just to actually talk about the problem. How can they contribute to the solution? Well, Egyptians, in fact, no doubt must be part of any solution that will be obtained in Gaza. We know when it comes to the normalization, we know to what extent it's important to bring tools and economical companies. We know that Egyptians will be participating in some kind of international force. But it definitely has different stipulations. Egyptians want to see solutions in Gaza as a more expanded solution of the Palestinian issue. An absolute victory for the Egyptians will be the connection between the West Bank Palestinian Authority and Gaza Strip. And they also have quite a good of an explanation why should it be like that. Because if they will not have such a more stable explanation of this issue that includes all the Palestinian aspects,
חמאס ימשיך להיות שם, יש שם עוד פעם סבבי לחימה, יהיה יותר קשה לגייס תרומות ולגייס כוחות בינלאומיים כדי להיות שם, לכן רוצים לראות איזשהו הסדר במיוחד עכשיו
especially now when they understood the potential damage on the regional level and on their personal national level. So ironically speaking, actually before the war they felt slightly hesitant towards the normalization process because they felt that they were slightly pushed to the margins. But now they see that this is actually good for them to normalize with Saudis because there will be regional arrangement, of course, but they do want in order to fulfill their roles, they do want some kind of solution in the end of which there is some kind of horizon of two-state solutions of the Palestinian problem. There will not be outsourced contract of Israelis or Palestinians to take upon themselves responsibility for Gaza without actually seeing something that is on the horizon at least. And now, just to summarize, I will ask you the same question. 7th of October, before 7th of October, there were attempts to promote normalization with the Saudis. Some say that one of the reasons of the beginning of the war was the Iranian attempt to prevent it. Did they manage to do that? So did they manage to hinder? Well, obviously it's a crisis in relationships. And our difficulty as well as the government to present the beautiful face of Israel in the Arabic world, you know. So did they manage to hinder it? I think in this sense we took few steps back. But I'm an optimist by nature. And I think that we learned many lessons and many things that can be done and many things that we can learn from this crisis. And crisis is also an opportunity, of course, and countries that I research, in particular the Emirates, they see it as an opportunity as well. I think Israel understands that we have, or at least I hope Israel understands there are certain opportunities here, and many things can be learned, and I would like to highlight a few of those possibilities. For example, the way we build connections and relationships. We talked about that during this whole conference. This is something we can learn to improve and to build a module. We can actually take those conclusions for better and for worse. That how to build connections with the Emirates, for example, or Bahrain or Morocco. What not to do, you mean? And of course, obviously, as I said, for better and for worse, accurately. So, yeah. So to build the new connections with the Saudis and other countries based on the model that we can actually generate here, that can be copied from one country to another. All the countries have their own specific characteristics and uniqueness, of course, but certain patterns can be identified. I'll give an example. Multilateral matter. Because of the very fact that the Emirates are hosting so many different agencies and conferences and events or multinational events that allowed Herzog to arrive in the midst of the war and Eli Cohen arrived in the middle of the war to the Aryeh conference. So through this multilateral event, we have some kind of international coverage. They don't have to say, okay, we invited. But you can also organize few meetings, bilateral meetings with the high-ranking politicians that are there. So multilateral matter can be actually leveraged into something with other countries. The backup and support of business communities. We look at the numbers of trade and commerce. It's an infrastructural agreement between Israel and the Emirates. For example, when you look at this agreement during this year that ended in such a catastrophic manner of 2023, we almost reached $3 billion of economical relationship between us and the Emirates, which is a very, very significant number. Acquired diplomacy that we don't see with the Saudis, and I think this is but there's an intent here, but with the Emirates, as you said before, maybe 5 people knew about that, but maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there was a quiet diplomacy. There was a trust-building process, as Ronen said, but with the Saudis, it feels to me that anything that is happening has immediately been leaked. Everyone knows about that, and everyone wants to analyze that in the press. I think that the quiet diplomacy is part of the things that we can actually module as a conclusion of how to work and how to work directly with other countries, creating a common joint language, interreligious discourse. We are familiar with those patterns. We know how to work, and the values, as Eitan mentioned as well, and interest, this integration of interests and values, this is the win-win situation, because otherwise, if we really just looking at economical matters, and that's it will be too empty, really. When Yoel talked here in the beginning of this day that when it comes to the Saudis, they would never sign normalization. They do it in order to receive favors from Americans. If we will not understand what they want from Israel, it will be a hollow agreement. We won't go too far. It will be integration, normalization. We need to understand what they want from us and what we do really want from them. The moment it will be relied upon values and interests, clear interest to both sides, we will be able to actually decipher this connection and move forward. I completely agree with you, but I think that the Saudis would quite open, and they're absolutely sure that they have 2030. The program, and a significant part of it is to bring innovation, and the security industry in Saudi Arabia is also quite interested in our gizmos, and I wish we would have this vision of 2030. Ambassador, did they manage the Iranians to hinder it, to foil with? No.
לא, אני חושב, ואני לא
No, I think they didn't.
הם הצליחו לעכב, הם בוודאי הצליחו לעכב את הסעודים, שלא מבינים לראות תמונת ניצחון חמאס.
I think the Arabs don't want to see the picture of victory of Hamas. I think the Emirates is a long-term vision. One of the advantages of the principles in Emirates, they don't have an expiration, they don't have elections every 4 years. So when they talk about strategy, 20, 30 years, it's 50 years. They want to reach Mars in 2070. Abdullah bin Zayed talks about partnership, long-term partnership. So they do look into the future, really. They do look above the crisis. And there's a first-hand experience of mine in Bahrain. Our concern, delay, and demographics are very different than the Emirates, and the economical situation is different, but they also look into the future. And they talk about the day after Rafah, maybe, in relationship with Israel, and of course I hope to hear good relationships. And we look at it, I asked Tzachi Hanegbi when he visited Bahrain, a very simple question, ask him, what is the peace budget of Israel? There is security budget of Israel, public transport budget, but what is the budget of peace? I adopted this idea from Gila Gamliel that told me once that, well, she was visited in a completely different context. When she was in charge of the development of women's status, she managed to ratify a decision that every governmental ministry will pledge that parts of its budget will be dedicated to the promotion of the women's status, whether it's economics or is it public transport government. I think it's quite a good idea. I don't know whether she succeeded or not. It's a very good idea. I'm not sure she implemented this idea or not, but actually I'm asking you, because I have here people that in the past maybe they made decisions, but now they will be making decisions. What is the peace budget of the state of Israel? We need to prioritize when we have budget, and then more things will be dependent upon us and not on just talks about peace. I will be talking more about let's make peace when it comes to the practical aspects. And I would like to remind you that Nitzana crossing, it took a year and a half, and it was, and I looked into it. I just wanted to learn what is happening in Jordan. This is how the trade is supposed to move from east to west and west to east, and what are the programs and plans. I'm going to talk to a big exporter of textile in Bahrain that wants to send here products, and from here to the west, and he's very much dependent on the bridge capacity. So Nitzana expansion before the war took a year and a half to publish the tender. It moved very quickly after the war, obviously.
תודה. אז הוא שאמרתי,
As I said,
אנחנו יכולים לדבר על שלום
we can talk about peace and about
וקשרים
land
יבשתיים,
crossings
ויושב
and
פה,
land
רונן,
connections.
מנכ"ל
Ronen
משרד
is here.
החוץ
He's former
לשעבר,
Director
שמכיר
General
כמה
of Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he
נעשה
knows how
גם
much effort has
בביקור,
been invested into
של
the
השר
visit
שר החוץ
of
לשעבר אלי
former
כהן
Minister of Foreign
לקידום
Affairs in
הנושא היבשתי,
Bahrain,
ובסוף התקע במעבר
and in the end it got
בגלל
stuck
הקיבולת. אז
with the capacity.
א', אני חושב שלא, האיראנים נכשלו.
No, I think they failed to hinder,
הם לא
really.
עצרו את הרכבת הזאת.
They didn't stop this train. They delayed it on the station, but it will be back on track. I think the interests here are too powerful.
ומעבר
And in addition
למצב הנוכחי,
to the current state of affairs, really depends upon us. A lot is dependent upon us.
ואופיר, מבחינת השכנינו,
Our neighbors, Jordan and Egypt, well, whether they managed, I think the Iranians succeeded too much. The very fact that you're here, not in Manama, is an example of those successes. I hope. Peace between Egypt and Jordan and Israel is actually emptying itself from the content. I'm not sure we're at the bottom, but we know that Jordanians already returned the ambassador. We mentioned the Prosperity Project that was postponed in relationship with Egypt in the dire crisis. Deep crisis, really. We also need to calibrate our expectations. Even normalization will create here some kind of regional anti-Iranian alliance. The Egyptians and the Jordanians and maybe other Gulf countries are not there. This is not just this Saturday night when we were attacked. That's as far as they're concerned, Egyptians and Jordanians, obviously now we talked about public opinion. An idea of having a public alliance with Israel against Iran is impossible when it comes to the public opinion. An additional topic, the way Egyptians and Jordanians see United States, whether they can actually rely upon them as an ally during the crisis. I'm not sure they completely trust them. I'm not sure and the Saudis as well need to wake up, in the light of the former past experience. And Iranians are perceived as the country with which you need to reach some kind of a system of understandings to limit the regional polarization and to try to live together with them. We saw now when Raisi was killed in a crash, we saw this very appeased messages change between King Abdullah and the leadership in Tehran and Assisi. But when you ask about the topic of that night when Iran tried to attack Israel with drones and missiles and Jordan stood alongside with us, another thing that we learned that relationship with Israel and Jordan is still derivative of our relationship with Washington. When Washington told them to stand up, when Sisi called, when Biden called Sisi, you will be introducing the humanitarian aid through Rafah, through Keren Shalom. Assisi said yes. When the United States attacks us or criticizes us for armament deliveries, we see Egyptians joining them lawsuit in The Hague. We must preserve the united front with Washington if we want to preserve our relationship with Egypt and Jordan. We need to convey strength and power to position ourselves as some kind of anchor of regional stability, a path to Washington, which will pave the approachment to Jordan and Egypt. I didn't think about that. Such a great understanding. You're so correct. I think we have a few more questions.
מי זה אנחנו?
I can't hear the questions, unfortunately. I completely agree. I think that when we will have normalization of peace with the Saudis, we just won't have a ceremony in the White House.
יש עוד שאלות? כן. אז אין שאלות? יש שאלות. אז לא לקחת שאלות? לסיים.
It's very difficult for Israelis to be quiet, so you understand that. So partially the problem that we're all looking for our own headers, that's the problem in the state of Israel. Yeah, many people are looking to gain political capital and not to get to the results. I think I've been asked to finish this panel, and thank you so much to Moran and Eitan and Ophir. Fascinating conversation.
לפודיום. את מאיר בן שבת, ראש מכון משגב.
So we have here the head of the Misgav Institute, Meir Ben Shabbat. My dearest colleagues and guests, I would like to open it with thank you, Tamir, and the team of this institute for hosting this conference. And I'm very grateful for your hospitality. I think the partnership in this discussion will allow us to overview this important issue on the agenda from different points of view, sometimes completing, sometimes completely opposed to each other, in order to circle this topic from all the aspects, to pinpoint risks and to build recommendations for various entities. As the wise men of Israel said, the only way to sharpen the knife is with another knife. I saw an importance with the message that as a result of this cooperation, message of removing walls and ability to have a conversation regardless different points of view. We don't have to agree. We probably won't be able to reach an agreement on all the issues, but it's not just a prevention of a joint conversation, but the other way around. Because of that, we require such a conversation that will channel this dispute into the relative pragmatic topics. We have a number of researchers in both of the institutions that have no doubt that their outcomes are impacted by this cross-pollination, because we are exposed to different approaches and are required to handle various discussions and points of view. That's very true when it comes to the research institutions, and I don't want my positions to be accepted just because my competitors are weaker. I do think that this is the spirit that is breathing in the corridors of other institutions as well. Distinguished guests. On 7th of October, there was an earthquake in Israel, and the shock and the horror of this monstrous attack, we added the sense of humiliation of national honor that has been trampled, and the shock by the failure of the critical systems that we did develop while remembering the surprises of Yom Kippur War while celebrating 50 years. The reality is still emerging in the northern border versus Iran and other of its proxies, in Gaza, on the political arena and the internal playground. The hostages still yet to return, and I would like to join in our prayers to their quick return. And the combat continues, and the list of fallen soldiers is long. The evacuated population is still evacuated. The Israeli society moves from the hell of the southern district to the battlefield of Gaza. It's still losing and trying to process what actually happened. The war undermined certain assumptions and historical paradigms, and arose among many of us thoughts about the meaning of the state, and brought us back to the very existential foundations as a nation and as a society. The recognition, based on which we wanted to liberate ourselves, but we are still in existential battle. Israel, after the war, will never return to be the way it was before. It will be wounded, scarred, in pain, but more connected to the very founding values of it, aware of the fragility of its existence, more sober, more moderate, and more cautious in the policies of security, foreign relations, and one would hope in the internal battles that exist in our society. And from here, I would like to access the topic of our conversation. Normalizations with the Saudis is a very important purpose of Israel, where we should invest a lot of effort, though not at any cost. From the Washington perspective, Gaza is not just a threat. The war in Gaza is also an opportunity for them. This is, as many speakers said, this is the chance of changing the global order to create the new Middle East, the center on which the normalization of a regional scope, and to pave the two-state solution vision. I assume that in the White House they would have happy to declare, yeah, we prevented the regional war, and secondly, we allowed the innovation of the global trade through the Red Sea. Thirdly, we switched the Middle East to the American camp. We converted them. We created the local alliance against Iran. 5, we brought to the end of the Arabic and Palestinian conflict. We added and took out the power from Gaza and Hamasi hands, and we opened the route to Palestinian state. That can be quite an achievement for Biden administration that will impact not just the foreign affairs, but also the global economy and the American one as well. How should it happen? Those of you who are not as knowledgeable as the representatives of the think tanks, Israel have to agree to end the war and to accept Hamas requirements to release the terrorists, go back to 67, and to receive the hostages in return. Israel have to accept that the Palestinian Authority, under different brands, will receive responsibility for the civil management of the Strip, and this is how they will be able to say, okay, main topics of war were obtained. We returned the hostages and we removed Hamas from power. This end of war in Gaza will end the warfare in the north and in the Red Sea. In addition, Israel forced to give its consent to the route that in the end will lead to the Palestinian state, and if not, any other stipulations of the Saudis for normalization with Israel. Israel have to agree for concessions on the nuclear civilian reactors and the defense alliance between both of the countries. In addition, will receive the alliance with the United States as well in different formulations. From the first point of view, it seems perfect. From one hand, with few uncomplicated steps, we can rearrange this Rubik cube. But from the other hand, it's indeed a real visionary solution that will raise us from this gas and swamp and bring us to the summits of the optimism and new spirit that the nation is so thirsty for. And if you wish, it has also a certain victory over the axis of evil and Hamas. Those that wanted to stop normalization will receive it regardless. From the other hand, when you delve into details, you understand that the picture is much more complicated. The price that Israel will be required to pay will position us under a question mark and the worthiness of this project in our eyes, especially at this particular time. The first price we'll have to pay is the end of war in Gaza without the decisive victory over Hamas. I think one cannot create a new order without Brig and the collapse of Hamas and destroying its military capacities. You cannot actually wipe under the carpet this global integration, hundreds of kilometers of Hamas, munition, and the military force that remain in the field. The damage we caused Hamas up to now is painful, but it's reversible. The ability of Hamas to rehabilitate itself and its deep hold upon the population and the government structures and the support they will receive from abroad will allow them to rehabilitate themselves quickly. After the massacre of 7th of October, the results of Gaza war is an existential matter for Israel. The Israeli deterrence and the image of our security strength are currently a test, and they have a decisive impact upon our political status in the region. Enemies, friends, and those who are hesitant which side to choose in the international system are looking at the occurrences in Gaza. The results of war will dictate significantly the way they see and perceive us. Israel signed Abraham Accords. Out of its power, the move with Saudis should not be perceived as a lack of victory and weakness. In order for us to be able to return and to settle down in the Western Negev, we must remove the threat. One of the hostages that were returned from Gaza in the deal with Hamas told in the media interviews that in conversations towards her release, the capturers offered her not to come back to Israel in one of the settlements of the Otef. So you shouldn't go back there, because we'll do that. We'll do that again and again and again. Our geographic proximity to the enemy doesn't allow us to take any risk. With all due respect to our friends overseas, this is not the war in Iraq or in Afghanistan, thousands of miles from their territory, and sometimes some compare it to the war in Gaza. Secondly, putting the civil governance of Gaza in hands of the Palestinian Authority or any other regime that is not Hamas. The truth should be said. There are no good options of day after in Gaza. If they would have been in existence, they would have implemented one of the many chances during the years of conflict. Nevertheless, we should not be the experts in reconnaissance that in current relationships of power, there is no one entity that will be replacing Hamas in the civil management of the Strip without Hamas's consent. Whether it's a Palestinian Authority, the clan camp, or technocratic government, or local heads of the clans, Hamas will be accepting such a model only if they don't have a chance, or if they will be shaping this model as their puppet government that they will be using in order to cover their military empowerment. There was a reason that the leaders of Hamas wanted to voice different declarations, will be willing to support the national Palestinian consent government in Gaza and the West Bank if we will be part of it. We don't have to be part of it. They know that we'll be able to be the puppeteer behind the curtains and pull the strings of them, puppets of this government. In such a case, Israel will pay a double price. The Hamas will be empowering itself under the coverage of the new government, but it will be hard for the Israel to operate against this government because of the national community, while failing to establish a governmental alternative to Hamas. In different circles, they are used by the attempt to put this Gaza in hands of Emirates or Mohammed Datlan, without delving into Datlan's political agenda. And I suggest for you to familiarize yourself with it and the challenging position for Israel. It's absolutely clear he will be dependent upon Hamas as well. And the considerations are quite similar for the Palestinian Authority and Datlan as well. So when it comes to the idea of the clans, which is a way to bypass Hamas through the local components, this idea failed completely, but particularly at this stage. When this is the state of affairs, there is no way behind it. 7 months after, there's still no any conditions that will create an alternative government for Hamas. Thirdly, the concessions that will be required on the border with the Egyptians. I assume that many in Washington are trying to build some kind of coordination between Israel's and American involvement in order to set and appease our mind when it comes to a contraband of arms. We were part of this already in January 2009. Big operation against Hamas, the CAST-led operation. Tzipi Livni, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel, signed such an agreement. And what came out of it? Nothing. So this agreement didn't stop the same war again and again. It didn't prevent it when one particle of contraband, when we were asked to sign the agreement opening the cross borders of Gaza Strip, intending to reinforce Abu Mazen towards the elections of those days in 2007, and nothing came out of it really. In Hamas, they celebrated this justice, and not even one particle of gunpowder was prevented from contrabanded into Gaza Strip. We need to create an actual effective prevention of Gaza weapons contraband. Without it, they will come back and hit us again and will strike again. Commitment of Israel to lead towards the Palestinian state through negotiation, even if we'll ignore for a second the ideological dispute and various political considerations and value considerations, and we'll just focus on that from security perspective. The real answer to this requirement is this impossible, it's unfeasible. Why is it unfeasible? Because Israel won't be able to compromise upon its positions about the borders and various security arrangements. Definitely not what happened in Gaza, and in light of an actual threat from the east. And I do not see a Palestinian leader that will be signing the agreement that will allow Israel to fulfill all of its requirements in those fields, and therefore this is improbable. It's unfeasible. Some will say, okay, so what's the problem of actually using the words that Saudis and Americans want to hear without actually doing the action? It seems to me that here, in this place, you understand very well. There are dynamics of declarations and commitments, and have certain dynamic, not disregard the power words. But not just because the probability, but feasibility. The different principles that are quite heavy, and we put them on scales as well. First of all, whether conversation about the Palestinian state after 7th of October do not reinforce Hamas. In fact, don't they understand the Palestinian public will see that as an achievement of Hamas, crowning Hamas as the entity that will bring the Palestinians this achievement, together with the high level of support they gain among the public, while at the background there's already the battle for the crown of Abu Mazen, will pave the way of the terrorist organization to take over the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria as well. And nevertheless, such a step that will be attributed to Hamas, such a victory, something that reinforces the axis of evil, the most extreme Islamic movements, will be reinforced instead of uniting around the way of moderation. The message it will send is different. Terrorism is worth your while. And what about the strength of the Palestinian Authority and its ability to actually comply with the expectations? Just to remind you, by the way, from 7th of October, Israeli military forces and agencies of security arrested more than 4,000 activists in Judea and Samaria, which is, in general, 18 arrests a day, I'm sorry. That's what we have to invest in order to allow the security in the areas where the Palestinian Authority is supposed to be in control without the crashes of Israel. Whether the Palestinian Authority will be capable of actually complying on its own, whether those challenges of this particular time. And what about the position of the Palestinian Authority? Whether the Palestinian Authority that still commemorates with its educational system the battle awareness, pain terrorists, they never admonish the massacre of 7th of October. Shall we give them the reins? Shall we ignore all of that? Whether we expect it to take upon ourselves those chances that are similar to that. After the heavy price we paid, and we still continue paying, the political rank not just allowed, but must be sober and cautious and suspicious of the political future. Israel needs to trust itself mostly, and to avoid entering processes that will be difficult or maybe even impossible to leave. Fifth point I wanted to bring up, but the most important one, I think, is the issue of Iran. One can understand the positive impact, as far as we're concerned, that local coalition may have against Iran, but whether it will be actually effective. Can you solve the nuclear problem? Whether we aspire towards pointless agreements and arrangements, the updates for recently that the United States resists the ratification of the Atomic Agency, a board of directors, reinforced that there are certain understandings between the parties that are being currently forged under the table. Those understandings will not solve the problems. Two additional issues connected to normalization with the Saudis, connected to the alliance with the United States and the nuclear that they require. I think when there is a unique status of Israel in the alliance with the United States and the qualitative advantage is maintained, we shouldn't be against it. We should actually support the alliance between the Saudis and the Americans. On the nuclear civil reactor, if the reports we receive are correct that the Saudis flex they're willing to enrich uranium on the American soil, then it might be an opening for certain progress. If those rumors are correct, because as Yoel said before, it's undermined my certainty of the statement, really. The defense alliance between you, the Israelis and Americans, where there is an attempt to actually obtain that as a part of the Saudi deal, is under a lot of question marks in our system. There are a lot of advantages when you enter such an alliance, but you can't ignore the risk and danger that it might position certain restrictions for Israel, and additional costs that we will pay, which I cannot currently undermine because of the lack of time. So shortly speaking, it depends on the characteristics of this treaty or the circumstances that will require to be fulfilled in such an alliance. To summarize my position, normalization with the Saudis, as I said, an important goal for Israel, but nothing to neglect, something we need to aspire towards, to make an effort to invest a lot into it, but as I said, not at any cost. And we need to reach normalization from power and point after rehabilitating our deterrence, removing the threat in Gaza, and out of a sober policy on the Palestinian matter. We need to continue a conversation with the United States to create the formula that will allow that and to guarantee an effective response to the issue of the Iranian nuclear. And if you will allow me, I would like to finish with a few words that are related to the bigger picture, and to say that, or to connect it to the things with which I opened. From this great darkness of 7th of October, tremendous forces that we have emerged, the spirit that showed that the nation of Israel is not tired and not fatigued. Our spirit is strong, we're well connected to our roots and the basic values, determined, vigorous, and not afraid of a lengthy path and journey. As we didn't lose our hope, what we actually saw reinforces this hope very much. So thank you, Mayor, and General Tamir Hyman, the head of INSS, will be taking the stage right now.
Shalom, תודה רבה.
So, thank you for your cooperation, and thank you, Mayor, my friend. And we go way back, mostly nights, really, not just days back, but nights back somehow, in the world of security of recent years. And I'm very happy that we cooperate here between our think tanks. He was a researcher, he left, and we continue to collaborate, and I think this is definitely in the spirit of this current period. I would like to say a few words about the way that we behave here, the audience really. This recently, all the nerves are exposed, people are less tolerant, and everything is sensitive and so difficult, and I'm really happy to see that when we listen here, it's attentiveness. Recently, I don't see it too much in those forums, so maybe that's a result of this cooperation, but I really salute you. I would like very shortly to address the words, and to put it this way, I think that nothing that comes at any cost before I get. Why is it important to actually follow the path? But any cost is always, I'm not familiar with such a thing, that any price. Everything has a price, and everything has a calculated risk and cost, an alternative cost, and the cost of risk. You can't say at any cost, but you need to look at the reality. And something that I will be saying may be bad news in your eyes, but we need to improve the security situation of Israel. The victory is obtaining the objectives of the war, an improvement of the security reality in the long term, obtaining the purposes of the war. I don't want to expand on that too much, but improving the current security situation, and that's something I want to address. The general regional deal will do that. There are three challenges where the national security of Israel policy led us to the bad situation, and those are the bad news. One of them is the resistance front led by Iran is perceiving itself as superior when it comes to strategy. Iran managed to create reality of the threshold of a nuclear state that at least cannot be threatened by any global entity that will be threatening upon them. No one has a threat that will be actually a military threat upon Iran. So they have almost immunity in this sense, and they're controlling 4 countries in reality. They managed to finish the multi-annual plan of force build-up that was planned for 17 militias all over the Middle East. Iran managed to connect through the very successful work, as far as they're concerned, through Nasrallah, the resistance front, the Palestinian resistance world to the resistance front of the Iranians. So as far as as far as Hamas concerned, they are the cutting edge of the regional strong superpower that reached strategic superiority upon Israel. If you are getting into this mode, and we failed to do that in the past, you understand the audacity of 7th of October, you understand where it came from. This process, this axis should be changed. If we'll continue to do what we did before, we'll just make it harsher. We'll turn our situation to dire one versus Iran, normalization with the Saudis. A regional normalization is not just the Saudis, in fact, and this will be impactful. I was tonight I returned from the Emirates. I don't even want to hear about the security ramifications of those regional agreements. You don't have to say it out loud, but in this neighborhood we all know who are the friends and who is behind it. So you don't have to say it out loud, but versus the bloc that recently managed to actually bond and reinforce itself and to tighten its rows, the other side didn't do that enough. There was a momentum, but we stopped. And therefore, we have a very bonded, active bloc of resistance supported by Russia actively and indirectly by China. And now we can actually build a very powerful camp that is tenfold stronger, backed up by the Americans, strong with technology, strong with economics, strong in and definitely victorious. But this is not where we're going to. This is my point of view. At any cost, but listen, but the cost is quite high, I guess. But again, the conflict between the Palestinians and Israelis, so much has been said about the concepts that were broken. We all adopt different concepts, and we all love or hate different approaches, and we can say that that's what brought us to this particular point. But management of the conflict, and this hope that while everything is quiet, things will dissolve. That was a mistake. It proved itself as a mistake. And this just doesn't work. It doesn't work. This split within the Palestinian system when Hamas traveled to one direction, Jihad went elsewhere, Fatah is going to different direction, allowed to manage this conflict better, but build also a stronger Iranian-led resistance front, because each component managed to create a state of affairs where the state of Israel is operating versus a more complex system. And that we need to bear in mind as well. The third matter, we're in the world of the global competition, and this global competition, those who are not in the space of right alliances, the partnerships will be erased, and they're big blocs, but the smart ones create regional blocs. In the Pacific, there is the Southern American one, the African bloc, and the Eastern European bloc, if it will conduct itself right with them, will be completely stuck between two superpowers, and we have this opportunity of finding the right strategic partnership. So versus Iran, when it comes to the Palestinian matter, and then the global competition, normalization with the Saudis will create a completely different regional battle dynamics. The war, the other thing I wanted to say, the war is an opportunity. Any war requires the process of end of war, in the end of which there are arrangements and agreements. That is how war ends. This is how it happens. So therefore, when we understand that this war, in fact, will be over at a certain point with a certain system of exiting from this war, we can use this vision of normalization on the regional level and the day after that I will say a word about as a possible process. The other matter this war created is something else, a destroyed area, completely destroyed area, which is an amazing opportunity, in fact. Gaza Strip, 70% of it has been published, actually requires an in-depth rehabilitation. It's a potential, not just for the sake of this rehabilitation, this is not that interesting, at least to us, but to use this rehabilitation as an attempt to significantly improve the state of security of Israel. We did something in Gaza quite big, really. Now we can actually benefit from what we did and to conduct, it happened, doesn't matter, let's cope with that. And third matter is operational, but it's been mentioned here, but Tzachi Hanegbi, the advisor to the government, Rafah, will be over very soon. The operation in Rafah will be over, the campaign in Rafah will be over. And the moment it's over, based on the operational plans of IDF, we don't have another Rafah. But whether you like it or not, it's over. The dismantlement of brigades of Hamas is over. There will be another stage then, but we can benefit from this very fact that it will happen anyway in the transitional stages between different steps of war, and to receive a consideration for it or do nothing, initiate nothing, and this stage will be over anyway, and in the end of it we'll have to retrieve and nothing will happen. So why shouldn't we be smart? You'll be doing it anyway, just benefit from it. There is a transitional stage after Rafah, do something big afterwards. There's no Rafah 2, that's it, we're done. 24 brigades of Hamas, the two other in El Burej and the Surat, okay, let's do them as well, okay, fine. So we dismantle the whole military rank. It doesn't dismantle the Islamic Jihad or the idea of the Islamic Jihad. You need to position an alternative idea for that. You can't use military force to overpower an idea. So what is the most important thing after we dismantle all the regiments of Hamas? The vision, the initiative, to decide what is the end game. We need to decide this is where I'm going, that's where I want to get. I want Hamas not to rule in Gaza, I want them to have a different civilian alternative address with the Israeli dominance in the field of security. I want to have here the regional expanded arrangement and settlements where Israel is an integrative part of other moderate states within the Middle East. I want United States strong, present, dominant, influential upon all the countries, because this is the country that is mostly supportive of Israeli interests at that point. Doesn't matter what kind of administration will be at power. And the purposes of war on the return of hostages, of course, and etc. This is where I want to go. And from this understanding, I need to derive backwards what will be the right step for me to do now to obtain this end game. Obviously, we'll arrive to the point of dispute that we face. And I think we need to put it on the table. I'm happy that you did that before. And this is the Palestinian Authority as a component within the settlement on the day after. Why is there such a point of dispute and disagreement? Because no one will not step into this space without the invitation of the Palestinian Authority and Palestinian Authority involvement. Neither the Americans, definitely, not the Gulf countries, not the Emirates, no one. Whether you like it or not, that's the reality right now. Obviously, we have problems with Palestinian Authority, no doubt. We're very happy with the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria. And if there is a concern that they will collapse, we save them. It's not good for us, really, because they are addressing the civilian matters that allows us the security dominance in Judea and Samaria. We have problems with them. Of course, there's a problem radicalization of educational curriculum, payment for the terrorist activities, corruption of the authority, the crisis of leadership. There's so many problems there. So the world tells us the following. The world, let's put it this way, the Emirates that have the money, that can ignite those things, and will help you to address those problems. Let us help. And we say no. And we refuse. We will help you. And you have to understand, really, I am, again, as I said, I received another lesson in modesty, really. Maybe in the end I will learn. I've been taught many lessons, but people understand that. Trust me, the ambassador probably knows that they understand the Arabs better than we do, the Emirates, the Gulf countries. They really understand it better than we do. They feed us. They know what they want to do. When they say, okay, Palestinian Authority, that is renewed, it's not the Americans saying that. When Americans say that, okay, instead of Mohammed Mustafa, we'll bring someone else, that's it. No, the Emirates, they mean business. They want to be accurate in the spirit of Palestinian Authority, and they offer it to us. They want to be involved. And they know that it won't happen on the first day. When we planned this war, when they planned this war, they knew exactly that in order to defeat a terrorist organization, it's a lengthy process. You won't be able to do that. It's not about the appearance of the authority there and the collapse of Hamas in one day. This is not going to happen. There will be an international Arabic coalition that will be taking care of the money controls and etc. It's clear for all. It's very clear that the land activity in the field of the distribution of humanitarian aid. If we don't do that, we reinforce Hamas. We'll play to their hands, and obviously, in the end of the day, we'll have to divide Gaza. So each neighborhood will receive aid. There will be local security, etc. It will happen, and it will be amalgam of international coalition. It will be a reflection of the Emirates, of Egyptians, and the Palestinian Authority will partake as well. And in the middle, in those different layers of not allowing Hamas to distribute the aid, but to do it through someone who is supported by the international coalition, there will be a seat of Palestinian Authority that is renewed. And only according to their success, they will manage to take a hold all over the Strip, whether they will succeed or not. That those who invited them, the international coalition, they will be missing their chance. I don't understand why can't we really recreate the victory we had during the Second Intifada. We did it once. If the alien would be looking at the state of Israel and say, but you managed to do that, it took you 4 years, why can't you do it again? You should do the same. What did we do then? Gradually, for 4 years, it took us to empty this barrel, but alongside with the current operations that has to take place all the time, of course, we managed to build a civilian infrastructure that gradually created a different vision, a different authority, something you can call it hope, whatever, something that created a competition to the jihadi vision. Islamic jihad is there without any competition. One you kill, you have 4 volunteers that appear. Look what happened in Jabalia. We killed 670 people, and again there were 700. How is it possible, really? Because today in Gaza, those are the heroes. Those who were killed, they want to avenge and come instead. This is the process where we need to create some kind of alternative, something that is not just a military alternative, but in a deeper infrastructures as well. Towards the end of this discussion, I would like to highlight 2 comments I had. A little bit of a pessimistic comment, really. In the profession called strategy, there is what one would call the connection between the strategic purpose and the operational form. If you wanted the military regime in Gaza, and I agree, those who said that military regime is the right way and the safest way to do that, yeah, you're right, absolutely true. It's expensive. It will put us in trouble with the world. A lot of difficult things we won't be able to cope with Hezbollah at the same time, a lot of disadvantages. But the statement is true. You should have got it in the beginning. For now in the field, it's impossible for us to establish a military regime. There's certain operational form of raids and entries and exits. This is not how you build a military regime. You want the military regime to make the decision on 14th of October that I want the way they made it. They always give an example that I don't like of Germans. And Malta agreed. Committee, they decided to divide German into 4 different areas. Or the martial regime in Japan for 2 years, when you decide that the military knows how to do that. But again, for 8 months now, you want to start anew. That doesn't work like that. The military knows how to do that when you get the instructions. Okay, there won't be a martial regime. There is new alternative civilian address that will go and accelerate within the years. But they didn't do that. So we didn't do A, now we'll go for the B. No, we can't. We can't continue like that. And another word about the strip, really. Look, decisive victory above the terrorist organization, complete defeat, you need to dismantle the military structure of this organization, but you also need to fight against the main entity that brings the success, which is civilian infrastructure, and we don't do that as well. Few more comments, really. The reform that we do here on our own after 7th of October, we all probably feel guilty, and twice a day we try to understand our mistakes, including yours truly, more than once a day, really. But where exactly and how? Where we misread the reality? How did we misread the reality? I mean, to be very cautious and not to lose focus. I feel that the whole world, the concept that's called arrangements and settlements, is currently losing its glory. We will be parting our ways from any arrangements, any agreements, or anything. I can tell you one thing, that in geopolitics, in the world of geopolitics, this component is extremely powerful and significant in managing the risks and etc. So if there is no such thing of ignoring the reality, otherwise we will not promoting any security. We have so much criticism upon the conduct of the United States, and some of the things are really absolutely unacceptable. We need to remember two things. What the administration of Biden did up to now and doing now is unprecedented. The political price that President Biden is paying for what he did is absolutely impossible, inconceivable. It has to be weird that someone actually operates against their own political interests to such an outrageous way, and he does it. He will be losing the elections because of the swing states, and it will be because of the support of Israel, and he still continues to do that, including today. It doesn't matter how many declarations he gives. And so the more dominant they are, the more dominant will be the Israeli interest. And if they will be isolated, it will be actually against. So I think Ophir talked about that, and the behavior of Egyptians and others is actually dictated by the importance of the United States here. Before we're looking for alternative address and we start to hedge our risks, and before we start to hope for something else, we need to recognize the good we have. Yeah, the alliance with the United States, defense alliance, there are disadvantages, but one thing it guarantees: stability and backup in the long run. And we need to delve in details when it comes to the alliances. Yeah, it's not copy-paste. You need to create your own alliance. It's clearly a different one from the Saudi alliance, and we have to create an alliance that will be more significant than theirs, of course, but still. Thank you so much, and it was a fascinating conference, extremely successful day. Thank you.